you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to MindShock True Crime. This is the Delphi Murders case series. This is episode 40, the Evansdale Connection. I've mentioned the Evansdale murders several times throughout the series, but we never really did a dedicated deep dive with a really intense focus on whether or not these two cases are in actuality connected with or without police corruption involvement. And that is what we will be doing now in typical MindShock fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support the MindShock podcast, help us get more mind-shocking content out there, keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases such as these, and many others, as well as missing persons cases and wrongful convictions. You can donate to our PayPal, just check the link in the description. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. So let's jump right in here. The Theorem Fact WordPress had an article here, September 10th, 2017, so fairly early on, the Delphi and Evansdale murders. This post examines the strange similarities in the cases of 4 murdered girls. Victims and timeline: Lyric Cook 10, Friday, July 13th, 2012, Evansdale, Iowa, found deceased. Elizabeth Collins, 8, Friday, July 13th, 2012, Evansdale, Iowa. Now, the ages are a bit different. I mean, 8 to 10-year-olds are obviously a different demographic than young teenagers. And especially in 2012, I mean, obviously online activity would be looked into, but perhaps 8 to 10-year-olds do not have the extent of online activity as 13 and 14-year-olds do, like Libby and Abby. Liberty German, 14, Monday, February 13th, 2017, found deceased. Abigail Williams, 13, Monday, February 13th, found deceased in Delphi, Indiana. Homicide narrative, Evansdale, Iowa. Cousins Elizabeth Collins, 8, and Lyric Cook, 10, were out riding bikes in the Myers Lake area of Evansdale, Iowa on Friday, July 13th, 2012, when they went missing. Their bodies were found some 5 months later in neighboring Bremer County in a desolated wooded area known as the Seven Bridges Wildlife Area. Seven Bridges is known for being an area where transients go to deal drugs, often meth, and where people go to engage in otherwise illegal or unsavory activities. It is also known as a place hunters frequent, and it was hunters who found the girls' bodies. The girls' bikes and Lyric's cell phone were found less than 2 hours into the search, having been abandoned on a trail at Myers Lake. No cause of death has been released by authorities. So, yeah, right off the bat here, a lot of unique circumstances and a lot of clear differences between these two cases. So, they're found in a nearby county as opposed to the alleged last known location. Obviously, there are issues in the Delphi case. There are issues whether Abby and Libby truly were where it is purported they were at the time alleged. And they were, of course, found theoretically the next day. But again, the sightings, yeah, there's a lot to go over in the Delphi murders case still, because when were the actual last known verifiable sightings of Abby and Libby by non-family members, or corroborated by more than one family member? So with Lyric and Elizabeth, they were not found in their last known location, or at least not found where the Lyric's cell phone and their bikes were. So they were found under 2 hours into the search. The phone and the bikes were found. Delphi murders, allegedly nothing found, not even the shoe. All of a sudden, shoes, clothes, things that would have easily been seen the first day of the search, not found, but then they were found the next day along with the bodies. So the homicide narrative, Delphi, Indiana. Friends Liberty German 14, Abigail Williams 13 left school early and were dropped off around... Okay, I guess this is... Wow, details not great on theorem fact here. They didn't leave school early. They came from school? Came from the home. They were dropped off around 1:45 p.m. by a relative to go hiking on trails near the Monon High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana. The girls' bodies were found the following day, approximately half a mile from the bridge. Photos of a suspect in the case were later released by authorities, as well as a brief audio clip of him stating, "down the hill." Although authorities have never confirmed it, most in the public eye assume the photos and audio came from Libby's phone when she discreetly videotaped him. Authorities have not released the cause of death. So, authorities not releasing cause of death in any of these 4 murders. Curious. I mean, it's weird, too, because they're not revealing anything, and yet these cases aren't getting solved. I mean, it'd be one thing if they were solved within a reasonable amount of time, and then they could say, oh, yeah, that's why we did that. But, yeah, I mean, this is why so many police corruption theories run rampant when you have these cases unsolved and so much unreleased information. Also, the area where Elizabeth and Lyric were found, known for transients, drug dealing, meth, etc., just like the bridge area, according to many. So that's curious as well. So, similarities in the 2 cases. Both cases involve young females between the ages of 8 and 14. Girls went missing while together as a duo. And see, I'm going to interject here again because it's... I mean, also the distance here. I mean, they're not that close together. I mean, we're talking across states here. But also not so far apart that it's halfway across the country would be unfeasible, but not impossible for a serial killer or something of that nature. But in terms of, yeah, I mean, we've also, if you haven't checked out the Johnny Gosch series regarding Iowa, I mean, there's a lot of human trafficking and child exploitation and child kidnappings going on in Iowa. It's really, really bizarre over the decades. A lot of people arrested for it as well. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, that place is a cesspool. Many believe Indiana is also a cesspool as well, with just the amount of sex offenders, etc. And no shortage of shady individuals, as we've gone over throughout the series of potential suspects or persons of interest. Again, this is MindShock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I do not claim anything is true or untrue on this podcast. We just examine possibilities and aim not to fall for logical fallacies. So, yeah, in terms of the distances, it's it's just far enough to be, for most people to not say, oh yeah, they're definitely connected. But also they're close enough to say, okay, well, theoretically they could be connected, particularly if you have persons of interest who worked in areas, which we've gone over several that have worked in both areas or in the vicinity of both areas. Also, what I was going to say, I mean, it's pretty rare, regardless of age, it's rare for 2 individuals to go missing at the same time or to be attacked, because obviously it's riskier for a perpetrator, unless if it's more than one perpetrator and they're armed. I mean, that's obviously a lot safer. So for those that believe there's some kind of ring involved and there's more than one individual, it theoretically, you could say, if they're used to doing this, they wouldn't be intimidated into trying to abduct 2 individuals at once if there's 2 or 3 of them and they're armed. Possibly even more. If there's 5 of them, they have the exits covered, etc. Like, there's certainly steps that they could take. But a lone individual committing these crimes, I mean, it does seem like it's just, again, not common. I mean, it's definitely not common. I mean, there are kidnappings where someone is snatched in the presence of someone else, but that's a lot different than taking 2 human beings that are both capable of screaming, of running. I mean, you could say they might not be able to fight back that much if their would-be abductors is some kind of really big hunter, outdoorsman's type. But Yeah, it's definitely unusual, and now we have two unusual cases. Because how many others are there? I mean, can we recall any, all the Mindshock listeners out there, the true crime aficionados? How many cases are there really where two people are abducted at once? Young teens. I mean, obviously, if you're talking toddlers, I guess it might not be that difficult for people to abduct 2 or 3 year olds or 4 year olds or 5 year olds even. But even that, I mean, I don't recall cases like that either. I mean, how common is that? That's not that common either. So obviously, the older the victims, the less common it would be that two would be snatched at the same time. Now we have two cases in the general region here, the Iowa, Illinois, Indiana region, where this occurred. So yeah, it's hard to completely write it off as not related. Now, I'm not saying it is related, but theoretically, potentially, there could be an MO here if there's a ring involved. Now, people state, okay, well, this isn't human trafficking MO. What if it's some kind of snuff film ring? I mean, there's a lot of sickos out there. If this is some kind of snuff film ring, I mean, where they want to film murders, etc., and possibly more than one, they want more than one victim. Like, if that's the intention, would they, and is the way they operate, they get maybe some insider info from friends and family, possibly unbeknownst to the person giving them insider info. Like, almost innocent insider info where, like, maybe there's a party overhearing, and then they report. Obviously, they might not think that any harm could come to them. Maybe they think it's some kind of, I mean, I don't know, just paid for information on certain family members, what people do. Perhaps they think it's some kind of weird, I don't know, possibly would be relegated to online conversation or something. I mean, I don't know. There's all levels of degeneracy. But obviously, I wouldn't think anybody would give up information leading to the death of whatever family members. I mean, you never know, but yeah, that's I'm not insinuating that at all, simply that there might have been some kind of second, third party providing information on comings and goings without actually knowing what the aftermath would be. Continuing on here, the girls went missing while together as a duo. The girls were murdered while together, which indicates either a proficient criminal or more than one offender. Also, I would say that's an assumption. Do we know for a fact that they were murdered at the exact same time? In the Delphi case, for instance, I mean, there have been rumors that the girls died on different days, separated by however many hours. In this case, I mean, they're not releasing cause. They're not releasing cause of death or any of. I mean, do we even have exact time of deaths? I mean, there's just everything's a question mark here, so we just have to keep that in mind. All were heading off to play or hang out together while they went missing. Lyric and Elizabeth were riding bikes. Libby and Abby were walking on wooded trails. The bodies. Well, also we do have to state that Libby and Abby, theoretically, if there was some kind of party, cemetery party, theoretically, they could have gone missing from a party. Whether or not they were dropped off at the trails or not, there could have been a secondary location where they might have even went willingly. Then something goes wrong down the line, then they're returned to where they were ultimately found after they were killed. So there's a lot of variables to keep in mind here. The bodies were all found in areas a hunter might frequent, and hunting relatively popular in all those areas, so that doesn't narrow down that much. Both sets of girls went missing shortly after 2 p.m. Lyric's grandmother last saw the girls around 12:20 p.m. and reported them missing around 2 p.m. That's a narrow window there. She acted fast. The Snapchat photo of Abby was taken at 2:07 p.m. Again, some people believe it could have been uploaded at that time, not necessarily taken. And the photo of Bridge Guy was taken at 2:30 p.m. Again, I don't know if that's corroborated. The girls were supposed to be picked up at 3:15 p.m. and were reported missing at 5:30 p.m. Dates: both cases occurred on the 13th day of the month and bordered a weekend, Friday and Monday. So, okay, so we have roughly, obviously some months have 28 days, some months have 31 days, but roughly 1/30th chance. The 13th day, I mean, that's statistically significant. I mean, that's like winning at roulette. almost. I mean, yeah, that's tough. That's tough to reconcile that. The 13th day of the month. Is there any personal significance for him to the teens or the middle of the month, and does he have 3-day weekends? I mean, that's definitely an interesting point to consider. Trails, Libby and Abby and Lyric and Elizabeth all disappeared while on a trail in the afternoon. In both cases, the girls were murdered by an unknown assailant. Cause of death for Libby and Abby has not been publicly released, but 2 photos, a sketch of a possible suspect, and a brief audio clip of his voice have been released. Cause of death for Lyric and Elizabeth also has not been released. Investigators have stated that they have compared notes on the Delphi and Evansdale cases, and while there are similarities, they do not believe the cases are related. Despite this, they have also said that they do not suspect the families in either case, which means there are 2 brazen murderers willing to abduct, control, and murder 2 girls at a time, ? That is quite an unusual and risky MO. I mean, yeah, it is a good point. Statistically, like, just keeping these statistics in mind, the 13th of the month, and just the rarity of 2 people to go missing and being killed at the same time, and in a generally the same area in terms of regions. Again, if like one case happened in let's say Washington State, another case happened in Florida or whatever, or even not that extreme, or Maine, Kentucky, just all over the place, people would still probably say, maybe they're connected, but there wouldn't be this level of scrutiny on it. Here, I mean, they're close enough to where it's just difficult to write it off. Unsubstantiated rumors in the Delphi case: Libby fought viciously with her attacker to the point that her fingernails were shredded. Libby captured images and a voice recording, possibly from the video, of the girl's attacker on her phone. Libby's phone may have been disposed of by the murderer in a body of water, but the images and video of him were retrieved from the cloud. The girls' throats were injured in the course of their deaths, either through strangulation or by being cut with a knife. There are reports from witnesses at the funeral that both girls were wearing scarves around their necks in open caskets. The girls' clothing was found in a body of water, likely to dispose of evidence. No DNA was found on their bodies. The girls were disposed of in a body of water. Abby survived the initial attack and crawled out of the body of water, but perished due to hypothermia and blood loss. She was either still barely alive when searchers found her, or had perished just prior to being found. Reports alternate between either her passing away in the ambulance or her body still being warm but deceased when searchers found her. Yeah, those are some interesting early rumors. We went over some of them, but we did not go over the possibility that the murderers thought she was dead when she wasn't, and she actually crawled out of the water. So does the truth really lie somewhere in the middle here? The middle ground logical fallacy is, of course, a logical fallacy, but that doesn't mean it's untrue. Let's not fall for the fallacy. Just because something's a fallacy doesn't mean it's not true either. I mean, the evidence is whatever it is. So is it possible that one of them was in the water and one of them was not in the water, and that accounts for all the conflicting reports that we've gone over ad nauseum by this point? Because in the previous episode, we went over a lot of the early rumors, but would that account for all the information? That would be curious. And also, obviously, extremely tragic. I mean, she's trying to survive. She climbs out of the water, and then she might have just died right before they found her. The girls may have been sexually assaulted, perhaps as an object. The girls may have been sexually assaulted and or murdered in a nearby structure, such as a barn or outbuilding, before being deposited where they were found. The barn on the Mears property is a popular guess. The girls' bodies may have been dragged. There may have been drag marks near where they were found. DNA matching one of the searchers was located on the girls, but he admits to touching the bodies when he found the girls. And this is not an individual previously discussed. Interesting. Part or all of the killings may have been captured on video. And that was an early rumor, and that's really weird, especially if there is a snuff ring. I mean, let's not fall for false dichotomies. Is there a snuff ring operating in the area and they simply weren't involved in this particular case? The bodies may have been posed in an odd or provocative manner, often indicative of serial killer behavior. It is also possible the bodies appeared this way because Abby crawled the distance before passing away. That's an interesting point, too. If that's true, wow, okay, that might account for a lot of variables. Proposed offender profile, Caucasian male, age 30s to 50s, approximately 5'7 to 5'10, 180 to 220 pounds, reddish brown hair, does not have blue eyes, facial hair at the time of the Delphi murders, carried a gun to control his victims, carried a deer kit fanny pack, which may have contained weapons or tools to torture or kill the girls, has a hunting background or hunts for sport, has killed previously, is likely left-handed, may have been driving a white vehicle, was wearing a hat, most likely a camouflage hunting cap with ear flaps or page boy cap, hooded sweatshirt, scarf, and blue jeans on the day of the Delphi murders, was overdressed for the weather, likely to conceal DNA. History of rape, assault, and or domestic abuse, was a lone killer, did not have an accomplice, and of course that is at odds with plenty of other information, was an opportunistic yet planful killer, i.e. was planning on murdering a vulnerable person on the day he killed but had not pre-selected his victims, identified the place he would hide, likely from a nearby elevated position such as a deer lookout, to watch and observe potential victims and where he would take them to torture, kill them, laid in wait to see who would walk by. And that's curious. Are there deer stands on those trail systems? Or were there at that time? Because, yeah, that would be curious. That would give him, if he had an elevated vantage point, that might give him a little bit of a heads up on how many other people were around. Although, based on the timeline, supposedly there were quite a few people walking around, so I don't know, that's what makes the case so bizarre. Killer is somewhat familiar with the local area, may make regular stops for work nearby, or have been in the area for a few days prior with time to scout out the surrounding area. Has a work schedule that coincides with a break on the weekends. The 13th of the month, the number 13, or just generally the teens, might hold special significance for him, might have endured a trauma around age 13, etc. Further, the time 2 p.m. or the hours of 1 to 3 p.m. may also be significant to him. He may get out of work around this time or does not work a job where he would be missed during the early afternoon hours. Is familiar with the local area even though he has not planted long-term roots there. May be familiar with the Delphi, Indiana area as well as the Myers Lake, Bremer County areas of Iowa. May also be familiar with southeastern Tennessee, specifically the Bledsoe County area. And this is, of course, based on that Megyn Kelly Today Show interview that we went over in previous episodes. So here is actually a police bulletin. Indiana State Police Delphi double homicide investigation continues. This was dated January 15th, 2018. Earlier today, members of the Liberty German family and Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter appeared on a live segment of the Megyn Kelly Today Show to help keep the double homicide of Liberty German and Abigail Williams in the public eye. Late last year, there was a similar appearance on the Dr. Phil Show. Also, as part of the family's efforts to develop investigative leads, information has been shared with numerous police agencies across the nation. One agency in Tennessee shared the information on their Facebook site and added verbiage that stated, quote, FBI has extended the search into southeastern Tennessee counties, including Bledsoe, end quote. So they specifically mentioned Bledsoe County. What does everybody make of that? In fact, this is a nationwide search for the person or persons wanted for the murders of Abby and Libby. The Bledsoe County Sheriff's Department has updated their Facebook site, which now states, to clarify, the suspect has not been seen in Bledsoe County or any other counties in Tennessee. It is a nationwide search. I mean, that's curious, though. So it seems like there wasn't any kind of sighting. It might have been a potential POI that was from the area. I mean, or if anybody else has any theories on that, that's curious. But continuing the profile here, blends in well with the local populations of small rural towns, is comfortable in the woods and in rural areas, knows how to navigate rough or uncharted terrain. If DNA was recovered from the scene, the killer does not have any felony convictions in Indiana. They connect DNA from all felons. Most likely single, a loner. If married or partnered, it is a distant and likely abusive relationship. In part, his travel for work helps mask his inability to maintain a sustained relationship. Has a substance or alcohol abuse problem, may have a history of petty arrest and convictions such as for possession of paraphernalia or shoplifting. May have worked at the Indiana Packers meatpacking plant and other similar meat processing plants, or jobs that are easier for convicted felons to obtain in rural areas. May be a transient or trucker who passes from one meatpacking or similar plant to another throughout the U.S. May have an alibi for the time of the murders, but this alibi may be superficial or a crack under scrutiny. Police are confident that someone knows who this man is and may be covering for his whereabouts at the time in question. May have become unusually interested in news reports about the case or otherwise involved himself in the case, such as talking excessively about it, compulsively reading news articles, or helping with the search party. May have changed his appearance after the crime, cut or dyed his hair, trimmed facial hair, disposed of clothing, etc. Had scratches on his body and possibly other injuries around Valentine's Day, February 14, 2017. May have explained this as having gone hiking or hunting. Hates women, perceives self as alternately a perpetual victim and a powerful aggressor. Experiences deep-seated rage towards women. Has persistently low self-esteem and feelings of having been wronged by others. Experiences extreme feelings of entitlement and is prone to rage and outbursts. Is an experienced and sophisticated killer familiar with DNA evidence collection. Knows how to cover his tracks and not leave evidence behind. May very well be a serial killer. May also kill single women or girls. Double homicides may have been simply crimes of opportunity rather than a specific type he was seeking out. May have discerned the risk was worth the gain by going after two younger girls. Will kill again. Some interesting posts on this WordPress article. FBI Highway Serial Killings Initiative. I wonder if the FBI has been contacted for data regarding truck drivers moving between Iowa and Indiana on the days in question. Are there any interstate rest areas within walking distance to the crimes? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting as well. So let's go over some articles regarding Evansdale. This is Des Moines Register, Grace Altenhofer. July 10th, 2022, so fairly recent from this month. This case is not gathering dust. Investigation continues 10 years after Evansdale girls were killed. A decade after two young girls from Evansdale were abducted and murdered, investigators and family are still searching for answers. Cousins Elizabeth Collins, 8, and Lyric Cook Morrissey, 10, were abducted while riding their bikes in Evansdale in Black Hawk County, July 13, 2012. Their bodies were found 7 months later by hunters in rural Bremer County, about 25 miles away. The killings gathered national attention and left a lasting impact on Evansdale, a community just shy of 5,000 people. I think everyone's got a niece or a daughter or a cousin, and to them it's like it just couldn't happen here, said Drew Collins, father of Elizabeth Collins. So I think a lot of people are worried about something happening again. I think everyone has a lot invested in finding out who killed the girls. Evansdale Mayor Deanne Kobliska, who worked for the city at the time of the girls' disappearance, said the case brought the community together and made them more aware of our surroundings. Everyone came together, we all met at the Community Response Center, and we had hundreds of people volunteer to search for the girls, Kobliska said. We had our volunteer fire department oversee all that and send groups out. People came from all over to help. Local law enforcement and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation continues to receive tips and investigate the case. According to Scott Rieger, a special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the department had received 117 tips in the past 10 months alone at the email address set up specifically for tips in this case. Our Missing Iowa Girls at dps.state.ia.us. It's kind of the natural trajectory of cases as they become more long-term, Rieger said. Information isn't coming in at the speed at which it did early on, but the information is still coming in. Rieger assisted on the case since it began in 2012 and became the lead Iowa DCI agent on the case after his predecessor left for another law enforcement job in 2017. While he had trained for child abduction cases, Rieger said that this was the first such case he had worked. Child abduction homicides are some of the hardest cases to work on because they're high profile. We, as a society, want to protect our children, Rieger said. Beyond that, particularly living in the community, being that some of the agents are from this area, you feel the weight of wanting to find a resolve, not just for yourself, but for the community at large, as well as the family. Could new DNA technology help crack the case? Jason Ellison, a detective with the Bremer County Sheriff's Office, joined the investigation in 2017. He said that investigators are constantly evaluating what resources we can apply to assist our case. DNA tech, along with forensics, genealogy, and electronic forensics, have come a long way in the last 3 years or so, Ellison said. So it's an exciting time in law enforcement for agencies that have similar cases to this, where it's kind of that endurance investigation, and we're waiting for some technology or new information that will help us push the case forward. Collins, whose daughter Elizabeth would have turned 18 this year, holds on to hope that technology will eventually lead to an arrest in the case. I thought when they found the bodies that we'd have quick answers, Collins said. But that being said, I do think time is definitely on our side. Technology is going to be on our side. Since 2012, the leaps in DNA tech are just huge. So hopefully something comes up and they'll be able to use something that was left at the crime scene to match it with somebody else. Elliott declined to say whether there are currently any suspects in the case, adding that, quote, "It's inappropriate for an investigative team to comment on certain suspects or people of interest," end quote. It's an active investigation. This case is not sitting on a shelf somewhere gathering dust, Reger said. We have countless examples across our country of cases that everybody thought they were never going to figure out what happened, and time just has a way of fleshing a lot of these cases out. So that's how we're going to continue to approach this one. I mean, not a lot of cases, though. Some cases that they thought, there's not that many cold cases being solved. Yes, there are some. There are some being solved by technology, but there's still there's just a plethora, tons of cases that are not being solved and not moving anywhere. Collins still follows the investigation, relaying tips that people send him to local law enforcement and the Iowa DCI. I get some people who have given me the ideas of what may have happened, so I look into certain people, Collins said. There's only so much investigating I can do, but I do keep my ears out. It's not really good for the investigation for people to give me the tips. That should go to the police. Over the past decade, Collins has led efforts to honor the memory of his daughter and niece. The cousins became an inspiration for Angels Park, a memorial park in Evansdale dedicated in 2018 to honor those who lost their lives too early. She was a very sweet, happy, loving child, Collins said of Elizabeth. She loved her brother, she loved her sister, she was very good to her family. She was always smiling, she was a good person, and she didn't deserve this. An annual Child Safety Day was established in Evansdale, as well as an annual motorcycle ride in the girls' memory. Child Safety Day raises awareness of children's safety issues, including bike helmets, properly installing a car seat, stranger danger education, and DNA kits. The other thing is we have police there, and it gives the kids a chance to be around the police and know that the police are on their side, Collins said. So it's just a well-rounded get-together for the kids. Despite the tragedy that took place in Evansdale almost 10 years ago, Collins remains active in the community, raising awareness of his daughter's story and pushing forward for other families of homicide victims. We've had so much support from people, I'm really comfortable here, Collins said. Even though the worst thing ever happened here, I love this place, I love Evansdale, I've lived all over the country, and I'm not leaving. This is home. And that's interesting, too, how some people just respond to tragedy. Many people leave the area of the tragedy because of the reminders, and here's an example of someone who did not. So here's another interesting article also from 2022. This is a month earlier, June 15th, 2022, with some interesting information here. This is from KCCI Des Moines 8. Investigators actively search for Evansdale murderer 10 years later. July marks 10 years since the two Northeast Iowa cousins were abducted and killed. Elizabeth Collins and Larry Cook went missing July 13, 2012. Hunters discovered the girls' bodies in a remote wildlife area in Bremer County 5 months after they went missing. Two gazebos in Angel Park Memorial Island memorialize Lyric and Elizabeth. The girls' bikes were last spotted in the park. It's still devastating every day not to have her, said Heather Collins, Elizabeth's mother and Lyric's aunt. It's the first thing you think of in the morning and the last at night. For me, it's very fresh. Doesn't seem like 10 years, said Drew Collins, Elizabeth's father. No arrests have been made in the case. Lyric and Elizabeth's families continue to get updates from state investigators. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation says the investigation is still active. According to the DCI, several people have confessed to the murders, but their stories don't add up. This is one reason the DCI has never revealed the girl's cause of death. So how many confessions has the Delphi case had, if any? Because here, the DCI is stating several people, not one person, several people confessed to the murders, but their stories don't add up. This is one reason the DCI has never really revealed the girl's cause of death. Everything inside of me as a husband and father would want to know that myself, so that makes me want to provide that to the family, while the greater evil is to let that out, said DCI agent Scott Reger. Investigators are still asking for help, and they need your help. What we find over and over again with unresolved cases, these things come together because the public continues to provide information and the investigators continue to pound that rock over and over again. The ultimate goal is to just find who did this, find out who or whom took our girls, Heather Collins said. Interesting statement there. Who or whom, as if plural? As if more than one person? To mark the anniversary, the city is holding a 10-mile ride and drive to raise money for Crime Stoppers. The reward to find Lyric and Elizabeth's killer is now more than $100,000. On the Evansdale murder subreddit, some information here. Supposedly, Lyric's family had her cremated, even though Elizabeth's family asked them not to. I mean, I'm not sure why. I'm guessing because of evidence. But I don't know if it's been officially stated that they do have DNA evidence, but in the articles that I just read, they're hoping that new evidence, including DNA evidence, will help solve the case, which means that is there a basis for some kind of DNA evidence or other evidence they have not released? So here is quite an interesting news piece. This is kcrg.com. And this was published July 12th, 2022. Features some interesting information regarding the families. And again, not necessarily pointing the finger at anybody, but just something that things considered anomalous by some regarding how certain family members would react during a missing time period or in the aftermath. So let's take a look at this. Actually, before we get into this clip, let's go through the deep dive breakdown on this case. One of the best write-ups here is from the Unresolved podcast, unresolved.me, and they have a write-up here on the Evansdale murders, which we will go through now. So July 13, 2012, two cousins disappeared from the small town of Evansdale, Iowa. 6 months later, their bodies were discovered in a wooded area about 20 miles away, but their killer has eluded police in the years since. Evansdale, Iowa is a small city in Black Hawk County, about 10 miles southwest of Waterloo. Evansdale and Waterloo tend to bleed into one another, as well as the city of Cedar Falls, which rests on the opposite side of Waterloo as Evansdale. The three cities rest along the Cedar River and seem to have grown into one another, which has created a larger metropolitan area. Despite Evansdale having a population of just under 5,000, more than 100,000 people live in the immediate vicinity, giving it a small town feel, but having all of the benefits of a much larger suburbia. For years, Evansdale enjoyed a reputation of being a rather obscure town hidden in the middle of the Midwest. About an hour away from Cedar Rapids and close to 2 hours away from Des Moines, it's really wedged in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, in a sleepy section of the state that doesn't receive much attention outside of election season. However, for the past few years, a singular story has engulfed the small town of Evansdale. It's a story that has become synonymous with the town itself being named after the locale of this particular incident. It's a story that continues to plague discussions in Evansdale to the point that a simple Google search involving the town will undoubtedly pull up at least an article describing this town's darkest hour. This is the story of the Evansdale murders. Lyric Ray Lynn Cook Morrissey was born October 2, 2001 in Waterloo, Iowa. Her parents, Dan Morrissey and Misty Cook Morrissey, had one child prior to Lyric, an older son. However, despite her family living in the neighboring town, Waterloo, Lyric would grow up primarily in Evansdale, being raised by her grandmother and her aunts. Both of her parents would struggle with drug abuse through Lyric's early life, so Lyric was primarily raised by her grandmother, Wilma. Despite her troubled home life, Lyric grew to be as normal a girl as possible. She was involved in all kinds of activities commonly associated with girls her age, such as cheerleading and gymnastics, and she also loved to spend time at the bowling alley. When she wasn't spending time outside, of course, no matter the weather, rain, snow, or shine, Lyric loved being outdoors. Lyric attended Kingsley Elementary School over in Waterloo, where she was also active in her local church. And like most girls growing up in the early 2010s, she was obsessed with the boy band One Direction. Along with two of her cousins, they had nicknamed themselves the Bradford Bad Boys after their current obsession, Zayn Malik. Lyric's cousin, Elizabeth Collins, was born a little under 2 years later on July 31st, 2003. Elizabeth was one of 4 children born to Drew and Heather Collins. She had one brother named Kelly, as well as 2 sisters named Amber and Callie. She was close with all of her siblings, even though she was known to boss them around constantly. Like Lyric, Elizabeth grew up in Evansdale. However, her family life was much stabler than her cousins, and she was incredibly close with both of her parents. She attended Poynter Elementary School in Evansdale and became a bit of a girly girl who loved makeup and nail polish and all of that stuff, in addition to singing with her friends and taking care of animals. She had a dog named Gus that she loved to baby, and the two had grown inseparable. Elizabeth also had a tougher side, which really came out when she played hockey. That was where she got to show off her more rambunctious personality, which also came out when she hung out with her friends at school. According to her 3rd grade teacher, Elizabeth was always the last one to finish her lunch because she was always talking. Lyric, Cook Morrissey, and Elizabeth Collins were cousins related by blood through their mothers, who were sisters. They spent a lot of time together at family functions, especially since Lyric ended up spending a lot of time in the care of her grandmother and aunts. The cousins were close enough in age that they had many similar interests and often hung out together during family get-togethers. When school had let out for the summer, the two ended up spending a lot of time together at their grandmother Wilma's house, where they often played cards with Wilma or rode their bikes around outside, weather permitting. That was actually what they were doing in the early afternoon of July 13th, 2012. That Friday morning, the girls had been dropped off at their grandmother Wilma's house along Broven Boulevard in downtown Evansdale. They had been there for a short time before deciding to go on a bike ride together a little after noon at around 12:15 p.m. At least that is when their grandmother, Wilma Cook, recalls the two heading out the front yard and setting off down the road on their bikes together. Sometime between 12:30 p.m. and 1 p.m., the cousins were spotted riding their bikes on Gilbert Drive, which is about a mile and a half away from their grandmother's house. This is not too far from Myers Lake, a local fishing and recreational hotspot. They were then spotted heading down the 1000 block of Lake Avenue, still on their bikes and still together. More than an hour had passed since the girls had left their grandmother's house, and they had not yet returned. Wilma Cook was growing concerned for her granddaughter's safety, but it wasn't until Lyric's mother, Misty, returned home that the family began to panic. This is when they began calling around to friends and family in an effort to locate the girls and began to do some preliminary searches of their own. After being unable to find Lyric and Elizabeth in the region around their grandmother's home, their family made the decision to report them as missing to the local Evansdale Police Department at around 2:48 p.m. By now, roughly 2.5 hours had elapsed since the girls had set out on their bike ride, and a search was launched in earnest to locate the two young girls. The search effort began at Wilma's home and spread outwards towards local parks, school, and other areas where the girls might have gone. Within an hour, Evansdale police had been joined by deputies from the Black Hawk Sheriff Department as well as members of the local fire department, who began searching bike trails for the missing cousins. A find later that day inspired hope, but immediately raised some alarming questions. On a trail located near the southeast corner of Myers Lake, the bikes belonging to Lyric Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins were found. Local firefighters had made the discovery at around 4 p.m. and forwarded the information to the police. Also located at the scene was 8-year-old Elizabeth's purse, but the two girls were nowhere to be found. There seemed to be no trace of them near the location their bikes had been abandoned, nor was there any kind of clue pointing in a single direction. So, what are the two options here? That they were with their bikes in that general area, and then abducted from, either walked off or abducted from there, or they were abducted elsewhere on their bikes, and the bikes were dumped in whatever direction from the original abduction site in order to cause more confusion. Continuing on here, police began combing through the immediate area around Myers Lake, moving outwards in the hopes of locating any kind of clue. They began trekking through the entire stretch of land that the girls had traveled, between where they had disappeared, downtown Evansdale, to the location that their bikes were found, Myers Lake. Soon enough, police were joined by hundreds of volunteers who came out in droves to show support for the small-town family. Not only did these volunteers help physically search for the girls over the next several days, but they began organizing candlelight vigils and press events to raise awareness and keep the story in the news for as long as possible. In the days after the disappearance of Lyric and Elizabeth, security footage was obtained from an auction house located a short distance away from the grandmother's home. This footage was brief, and the cousins only appeared in the footage for a second or two, but showed them, surprisingly, riding away from Myers Lake at around 12:11 p.m., a time period that fit in with the established time frame. Investigators hoped that they could pinpoint more of the girls' bike trip with similar footage from other establishments, but seemed to have little luck in that venture. They would have to rely upon less sufficient methods of tracking the girls, such as scent dogs and witness statements. So wait a second. In 2012, there are no businesses other than this auction house? I mean, if it's a residential neighborhood, that's fine, but they were supposedly sighted also in the park. And, I mean, you would think they would have some kind of security footage. Unless they did get more footage and they don't want to release what it said. The FBI agreed to cooperate in the search for the girls, sending some of their specially trained divers to look through Myers Lake, where the girls' bikes had been found. So they were pedaling away from Myers Lake at 12:11 p.m. Away, but then their bikes were found there later. Okay. Eventually, after a few days of setbacks, local officials decided to partially drain the lake to assist in the effort, but were ultimately fruitless in finding anything of value. Myers Lake quickly became the primary setting for the investigation. After all, it was the location that the only real evidence had been found, the girls' bikes, and where their known path had seemingly come to an end. It was believed that if anything happened to Lyric and Elizabeth, it had likely happened there. Investigators had yet to determine whether the cousin's disappearance was related to foul play or it could have been something accidental. So cadaver dogs, infrared-equipped aircraft, and dozens of volunteers scoped the area around the lake for any sign of the girls, but following this exhaustive search around the lake and its subsequent draining, Myers Lake proved to be a dead end for investigators. Evansdale Police and Blackhawk County Sheriff's officials spearheaded the investigation, but were assisted by numerous officials, with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation as well as the FBI, who contributed more than 30 investigators to help search for the missing girls. While exhaustive searches were being conducted at and around Myers Lake, investigators began hitting up known sex offenders, especially those that had a history of targeting underage victims. These were not only known sexual predators, but those that had expressed any kind of interest in underage girls in the past, be it child porn or anything similar. Many of these known sex offenders were interviewed numerous times by different investigators, and several were brought in to take polygraph tests. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any of these individuals were involved, as police cleared all of them through a rigorous vetting process. Also vetted through the process were known acquaintances of the two missing girls, Lyric and Elizabeth. Their parents, family members, and family friends were interviewed by detectives who were looked for any sign of deception in not only the physical interviews, but written statements and outside correspondence. The family members of the two girls agreed to have their phones and other electronic devices searched for any concerning communication, but nothing was found. To police, it seemed like this might be the worst possible outcome, as it was becoming clearer and clearer that the girls had likely been taken by a complete stranger, someone that was not familiar to them prior to their disappearance. As I'll get into it in a bit, this happens in an incredibly small fraction of cases and is incredibly rare. For an extended period of time, local police continued to receive tips from the public. For the first few weeks at least, police officials estimate that they received roughly 20 tips per hour. But by the end of the summer, the number had decreased to roughly 40 a day. By July 20th, a week after Lyric and Elizabeth disappeared, police seemed to have ruled out any accidental causes such as drowning, etc. This development allowed them to move the scope of the investigation fully to an abduction, with them believing that foul play was undoubtedly involved in this case. However, everyone involved continued to hope that the girls were alive and that they could be brought home safely. Sandy Brault, a spokeswoman for the FBI, stated later that month, "We believe these girls are alive, and we are not discouraged by the passage of time since their disappearance. We are urging anyone with information to come forward. Any information, as insignificant as it may seem, could be vital to the investigation." And is she just saying that to keep up morale? Because statistically, I mean, people that are kidnapped, most of them, unfortunately, are killed within a very short period of time. As journalists and media personalities began to focus in on the missing girls from Evansdale, those that were close to them, in particular their family members, found themselves facing some intense public scrutiny. And none were more vilified in the press than the father of 10-year-old Lyric Cook, Dan Morrissey. At the time, Dan Morrissey was a 36-year-old father of two who had already divorced Lyric's mother, Misty. As interested parties began to look into Dan's past, they discovered that he was involved in several ongoing criminal cases. In fact, he'd been let out of police custody to be with his family following Lyric's disappearance. The crimes that Dan was alleged to have been involved in included everything from assaulting his ex-wife to multiple drug felonies, including manufacturing, possessing, and dealing methamphetamine in large quantities. He was actually looking at decades behind bars if convicted, which he actually was the following year, 2013. Morrissey expressed his innocence both to law enforcement and the press and stated that he was just an addict spiraling out of control following the disappearance of his daughter. And again, I mean, is that really that surprising? If this guy was involved in drugs in the past, his daughter disappears, would he not have a massive relapse? I mean, would anybody blame the guy? I mean, this is probably the worst. This is the worst thing that can happen to a parent. So, yeah, I mean, I guess missing would be the second worst and then murdered the worst. But, I mean, obviously the two can go together. He would state in his court case that he began consuming significant amounts of methamphetamine after Lyric disappeared. But that was disputed by the Black Hawk County Attorney's Office, who stated that Dan was involved in the production of meth both before and after his daughter disappeared. In fact, he was making meth in his home while his 17-year-old son, Lyric's brother, was living there. In 2013, Dan Morrissey was convicted to more than 90 years in prison, with Judge David Stout stating during his sentencing, quote, "Since you were released from custody after your daughter's unfortunate event, you were utilizing other women you knew to go to stores to buy or steal pseudoephedrine so you could manufacture methamphetamine. The fact that your child was in your home when you were arrested on these events shows that you don't use very good judgment concerning yourself as a parent to subject them to those conditions. To those conditions, to those individuals, and to that behavior is certainly not good parenting," end quote. Despite being found guilty of numerous drug charges and facing a bid of at least 30 years in prison, Dan Morrissey continues to assert that he had nothing to do with his daughter or niece's disappearance. He claims that the belief that they might have been taken due to some drug debt held by someone in the region or as retribution for criminal activity does not seem to hold water. Speaking to local news station KWWL in 2018, Dan stated, quote, "Yeah, it doesn't even make sense if you think about it and play it out. You know, why would this happen? If I had any idea of somebody that was in my life that I owed money to or had threatened me or anything, you'd think I wouldn't know who that person is. So, I mean, that would be the number one suspect in the case and this thing would have been solved a long time ago. But there is absolutely nobody in my life that I owe money to or that I have told on or anything like that. That has nothing to do with my daughter. And why would they abduct Elizabeth and my daughter at the same time in another town that my daughter's not even from on a random bike ride that nobody even knew they were going to take? It doesn't make sense," end quote. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to argue what he said there, but I mean, obviously there could be a lot of missing variables. Over the next several months, the other three parents became notable figures in their own right as they fought for answers regarding their still missing daughters. Misty Cook, Lyric's mom and Dan Morrissey's ex-wife, struggled significantly in the aftermath of her daughter's disappearance. She stayed active in the search for Lyric, constantly appearing on television programs and news broadcasts alongside her sisters and other family friends. She even began reaching out to media figures like John Walsh to step in and help, at one point even sending Walsh a public message through Facebook that included the line, "I am in my darkest hour and close to the edge." The following day, Monday, August 20th, Misty was rushed to Allen Hospital after being found unresponsive at her home. She had mixed her medication with alcohol, resulting in her losing consciousness and being rushed to the hospital. She would recover, but continued spiraling in the following months, slipping down the treacherous path of drug abuse that she had struggled to dig herself out of for years. In 2014, Misty was sentenced to 10 years in prison for drug-related offenses, but would be released from prison about a year later. Thankfully, when she was released, she was on the straight and narrow and looked to get her life back together. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's parents, Drew and Heather Collins, struggled to make sense of their daughter's tragic disappearance. Heather became a regular at the Hall of Law, giving out flyers and posters with the girls' images to anyone that seemed interested. She even began collecting signatures for a petition to change the Amber Alert laws, believing that the system waited too long to report the disappearance of the two girls. Both of Lyric's parents would appear on television whenever possible to plead for their daughter's safe return, but unfortunately, their marriage would not be able to last. Shortly after Elizabeth's disappearance, the two would begin to drift apart, eventually deciding that divorce was the best step for them. They would remain cordial and friendly for their family, of course, always hoping that Elizabeth would return to them, even though days, weeks, and months continued to pass. It wasn't until the end of 2012 that the families of Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins received any kind of update. Seven Bridges Wildlife Park is about 20 miles northeast of Evansdale. In Bremer County, known primarily as a hunting ground, Seven Bridges is no stranger to illicit or unsavory behavior. Once upon a time, this had been the scene for underage parties. For decades, dating back to the 70s, Seven Bridges Park had been a place for high school students to meet up with other teenagers to engage in underage drinking, bonfires, and other kinds of rebellious activities away from prying eyes. But over time, it had lost that luster, and instead became as a park and dumping ground that only locals seemed to know about. That didn't mean that it wasn't a haven for trouble, though. Starting in the mid-2000s, Seven Bridges Park had seen dozens of visits from Bremer County Sheriff's deputies who were called to respond to everything from the dumping of a roving meth lab to hooligans tearing up the park's dirt and grass with ATVs. It was usually minor stuff like that, which was more annoying than actually troubling. But close to 6 months after the disappearance of Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins, deputies were called out to a scene unlike anything they had previously seen at Seven Bridges. Early in the day on Wednesday, December 5th, 2012, a group of hunters had been moving through the Seven Bridges Park when they came upon two sets of human remains. The remains had been somewhat shrouded in an isolated part of the park where foot traffic wasn't a huge concern. In fact, investigators stated that the remains were placed in a location that someone would have had to have been almost on top of to notice. If anyone was walking a few feet away from the remains, they likely would have missed them. These two sets of human remains appeared to be smaller in stature and by all accounts appeared female. That's what police reported later in the day after receiving a call from the hunters at around 12:45 that afternoon. Soon, the area around Seven Bridges Park, which was primarily known for raccoon hunting, was overrun with police officers, investigators, and journalists. The remains were sent off to the state medical examiner's office in Ankeny for identification, but most believed that these were the two missing girls from Evansdale, Lyric and Elizabeth. The following day, Thursday, December 6, 2012, Chief Deputy Rick Abbott of the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office held a press conference. During this conference, he announced that the officials were confident that the two bodies found at the Seven Bridges Wildlife Park were indeed Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins. Despite investigators not yet receiving test results back from the state medical examiner's office, there were no other missing persons cases from the region, at least none with two similar victims, and the small stature of remains hinted at them being children. This announcement seemed to provide the loved ones of the cousins an answer for what had happened to them, but it was anything but conclusive. Details of the girls' deaths have never been publicly released, such as their cause or means of death, and detectives did not release any detail that inspired confidence in justice being found anytime soon. This public announcement of the girls being found, but their case remaining as unsolved as ever, led to an ominous haze that began to settle over the region of Evansdale, a dark cloud that has yet to lift several years later. The next Monday, December 10th, 2012, the Iowa State Medical Examiner's Office publicly confirmed that the bodies found were Lyric and Elizabeth. They provided information to the local police chief, Kent Smock, who then informed the families before the press obtained the news. That evening, Heather Collins, Elizabeth's mother, posted a public message on her Facebook page, which read, quote, "We have been so blessed by the outpouring of all the prayers and support tonight with the gut-wrenching news that my beautiful daughter and my niece's bodies were found by hunters. This was not the outcome we wanted, but we now know they are up in heaven with our Savior, and our nightmare of where they are and what is happening to them has been answered," end quote. Local ceremonies were arranged for the two girls, with Lyric Cook's taking place on December 29th at the Heartland Vineyard Church in Cedar Falls. Elizabeth Collins' ceremony took place on December 13th, but a graveside ceremony was held months later in May of 2013, which featured more than 200 people, as well as Elizabeth's pet dog, Gus, who was able to say goodbye to his best friend, wearing a rose on his collar in honor of Elizabeth, who was finally put to rest. Both of the cousins were memorialized at the location where their bikes had been found, Myers Lake. The trail that goes around the lake was renamed the Trail of Angels, and memorials for both Lyric and Elizabeth were added throughout the park, which had been renamed Angels Park. People in the region and supporters of their family had set aside thousands of dollars to renovate the park in their honor and even arranged for a mural of the girls to face the nearby highway. In addition, July 13th would forever be known as Lyric and Elizabeth Day in Evansdale, which refused to forget the two girls whose name had become synonymous with the small town itself. Their deaths would even inspire legislation in Iowa as state legislators moved to bring back the death penalty for child murderers, and changes were proposed to the Amber Alert laws. Despite the appropriately named Cousins Act ultimately not passing, this did lead to changes in the system, which allowed more instantaneous alert to hit regions that children had gone missing, which the Cook and Collins family believe might have made a difference in their abduction. To this day, Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins have not been forgotten, and their unsolved murders continue to haunt those in and around Evansdale. You know, the thing that's kind of weird, though, like, without any kind of suspect being spotted, without any kind of vehicle, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. If there was an alert put out, maybe somebody would have noticed somebody, but you would think if they noticed somebody strange with two girls, like a strange-looking man or whatever, or an oddly behaving vehicle, you would think they would have reported that anyway, even if it was a day or two later, because once the news hit. So, I mean, I don't know. While those that knew and loved Lyra Cook Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins had to put the girls to rest and mourn their two lives, which had been lost far too soon, the investigation continued on. Now it was expanding from a missing persons investigation to a much more nefarious double murder, which changed things significantly. You see, the double murder of two children at the same time is a rare offense for even violent crime standards. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, commonly abbreviated as NCMEC, states that abductions of random children are already rare. Most of these offenses take place over the internet and are arranged ahead of time by the culprits. But the actual snatching of children off the streets is incredibly rare. Two children being abducted at once in the middle of the day is even more rare. It happens in a very small fraction of disappearances, with most cases involving a family member or family friend of some kind. The abduction of two children at once in broad daylight was such a rare offense that the FBI had recorded only roughly 15 similar incidents between 1974 and the date that the cousins went missing in July 2012. So, in over a quarter of a century, in all these decades, only 15 similar incidences. I mean, this is what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast. You have to keep in mind when comparing that even to Delphi. I mean, this is such a rare occurrence. To think that they're not connected, I mean, again, I'm not saying they are or they're not, but to just completely write it off completely. I don't know, it's difficult to do that. It's just so difficult. Yet it seems like this was one of these extremely rare circumstances where an opportunistic predator had managed to corner or lure both of the girls into a vehicle and had likely driven them elsewhere, possibly to Seven Bridges Park, but details are pretty scarce when it comes to the actual police investigation. Investigators have concealed many of the intimate details of the case, details such as how the girls had been killed, where they had been killed, whether they had obtained DNA from the scene, etc. I'm assuming they haven't released any kind of time of death either, because were they dumped there months later? It's tough. These are details that they have chosen to keep private, likely in an attempt to weed out false confessions. In fact, in the immediate aftermath of the discovery of the girls' bodies in December of 2012, police would receive two separate confessions, men claiming to be the killer. In both of these cases, police were able to eliminate these men as viable suspects because they did not know these intimate details and got inherent facts incorrect. See, here's the problem with that, though. If these people are completely insane, they might get the facts incorrect. They might get the facts incorrect about what they had for breakfast that day. So, like, hopefully, when they ruled them out, they actually ruled them out based on their whereabouts being verified at particular times during the abduction or whatever, to make sure that it wasn't them. Because, yeah, I mean, obviously a normal person might remember details and not get them wrong. Unless, again, also, we have to keep in mind, some of these psychotics, if they like playing games with the police, would one of these completely insane psychotics that loves playing games, would they intentionally get details wrong? So that the police would think that they were giving a false confession when they actually were the killer? Again, I mean, in all of history, that has had to have happened at least a couple times, right? I mean, there's a lot of wackos out there that just love playing these mind games. Some of them might not even care if they're arrested and killed. I mean, again, when you're dealing with completely mentally unhinged individuals, they're not going to logically assess anything. These details continue to be closely guarded more than 5 years later as the case continues to be looked at by local, county, state, and federal officials. Approximately 6 months after the bodies of Lyra Cook and Elizabeth Collins were found in Seven Bridges Parks, another troubling case began to play out in Dayton, Iowa. On May 20th, 2013, 15-year-old Kathleen Shepard was walking home from school with a 12-year-old friend of hers. While walking home, the two girls were abducted by a man that was able to lure them into his vehicle under threat of violence. After getting into the man's truck, their abductor drove them around for a bit, crisscrossing through the immediate area, which was mainly rural farmland. He then drove the two girls to a pig farm that he worked at, which was quiet and isolated. There, the abductor zip-tied the girls' hands and began separating them. He led away 15-year-old Kathleen Shepard, but left the other girl unsupervised in his truck. This girl, a 12-year-old, was left alone and managed to escape the truck just moments later. She ran off in an effort to get help, which she found minutes later. When police arrived at the scene, they discovered a troubling sight. The abductor's truck was still at the location, but his body was inside the truck. He had taken his own life in an effort to escape culpability. But 15-year-old Kathleen Shepard was nowhere to be found. Her body would later be discovered in the Des Moines River several weeks later, about 20 miles downriver from the pig farm. She had been stabbed and beaten to death, the victim of a senseless abduction and murder. The abductor was later identified as Michael Klunder, a registered sex offender from Stratford, Iowa, who had spent the better part of 2 decades in prison for kidnapping and assaulting a woman. In addition to kidnapping 2 3-year-olds, thankfully, what kidnapping 2 3-year-olds? Like, what is with this guy and kidnapping 2 victims at once? Thankfully, all of those victims survived, but Klunder would return to violent crime in 2013, abducting Kathleen and her friend, and likely planning to kill and or sexually assault both. Instead of facing any consequences for his actions, this piece of expletive had decided to take his own life at the crime scene, leaving the family of Kathleen Shepard with little in the ways of justice or resolution. This abduction came less than a year after the disappearance of Lyra Cook and Elizabeth Collins, and had unfolded about 100 miles west of Evansdale in Dayton, Iowa. From the very beginning, the similarities between the two cases intrigued investigators who began digging into the history of Michael Klunder, looking for any possibility that he had been involved in the Evansdale murders. In addition to the troubling circumstances of the abductions, with 2 girls being abducted at the same time, after being incentivized by violence, it was learned that Klunder had been released from prison in 2011, just months before Lyric and Elizabeth had gone missing. However, by 2014, it seemed like investigators had effectively ruled out Michael Klunder as a suspect in the Evansdale case. Special agents with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation had spent months comparing the cases and were pretty confident that Klunder was not involved in the Evansdale case, not only because of forensic differences in the crimes, but due to Klunder potentially having an alibi. See, here's the thing. Does he have an alibi or not? Like, what does potentially having an alibi mean? And if there's more than one, if there is a ring of sickos, and they do this both, I mean, yeah, it's weird. Like, serial killers, I kind of forgot what case this was. There was a case where serial killers communicated online and kind of bragged about their crimes. Are there these whack jobs that kind of do the same thing and maybe even meet up together, maybe even assist in crimes? Is it possible that Klunder possibly might have known one of these other sickos in the area, so maybe even if not directly involved, he could have had some kind of a connection? It is believed that Klunder was not near Evansdale when the 2 girls went missing, having been in or around his home in Stratford, Iowa at the time the cousins were abducted. However, despite police ruling him out as a suspect, some continue to have suspicions about Klunder. And with him no longer being here to answer for himself, many of those questions remain unanswered. Kent Smock, the Evansdale police chief, stated a short time later, quote, "I think people were kind of hoping this would be the end of it. Ruling him out, that means that the person is still out there," end quote. So what does that mean? So he was supposedly in or around his home? So do they have video surveillance from like a business and they added up the drive time to Evansdale and that's how they ruled him out? Or was it some neighbor who said they saw him, but they possibly could have been mistaken? Especially if it's maybe him and 1 or 2 other guys involved in this ring. The other thing that's kind of weird, though, so Kathleen was nowhere to be found, but he returned to his own truck, found the other girl missing, and decided to just kill himself right there in the truck. So what did he do with Kathleen, and how exactly did he dispose of her, and at what distance from the truck? I mean, there's still unanswered questions here. Is it possible there was another guy at the pig farm? Is it possible there's a ring here? Because again, the rarity of these types of events, now we have a third instance here. So in more than a quarter century, there's only been 15 cases, and now we have 3 inside several years of each other in this exact same region. Does nobody find that weird? And this guy also abducted 2 toddlers before. Now, that's a little different. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm sure there's probably more cases where like really super young children are so-called abducted. I mean, hopefully he didn't harm them or anything. I don't even know if I want to look into that case. But if it was some kind of, I mean, who knows what that was. But, yeah, this is crazy. I mean, statistically, like, you could argue there's enough sick freaks out there across the whole country or the world, but this is all happening in this little region of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. I mean, this little tiny region here. I mean, we have 3 different dual abduction murder. I mean, this is crazy. The coincidence stack is getting a little high here. It's getting a little high. On June 24th, 2013, close to a year after the 2 girls had gone missing, Evansdale police announced that a tip had led to a new lead in the investigation. This was now inspiring some hope for resolution to the case, and investigators believe that this tip might actually lead them to their culprit. The tip revolved around a description of a large, white, full-sized, old model SUV, possibly a Chevy Suburban or a Ford Bronco, which had been spotted by multiple witnesses near the crime scene between 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. on July 13th, 2012. This would fit in with the established time frame, and more than one witness had even placed this vehicle in the vicinity of the abduction. 3 witnesses, in fact, had seen this vehicle on Arbutus Avenue at around the time the girls went missing, which is located just next to Lake Avenue where the girls had been last seen, as well as next to Myers Lake where their bikes were found. 2 of the witnesses had reported seeing this white SUV to police during their initial canvass, claiming to have seen it parked between the bike trail signs. However, it wasn't until the 3rd witness reported seeing the same SUV close to a year later that police went back over their notes and noticed the potential significance of this lead. Wow. I mean, this is completely bungled then. I mean, is this how law enforcement works in this area? I mean, this is just insane because, I mean, what? So 2 witnesses report, not 1, but even if it was only 1, wouldn't they investigate an SUV in the area of the disappearance, especially if the SUV was never identified? They should have immediately looked at all of surveillance footage from that area, from highways, exit, I mean, everything. They might have actually been able to get the people responsible then and there. They didn't lift a finger on this until a year later when the 3rd witness and they went back over their notes. I mean, this is unconscionable. The 3rd witness, who came forward in June 2013, reported seeing the white SUV near the woods on the east side of the lake, which was incredibly close to where the girls' bikes would be found later that afternoon. Police forwarded this tip to the media and asked for anyone with information to come forward. I mean, it's a lot easier to come forward when a whole year hasn't passed. They continue to believe that this information could be vital for the investigation and think that any additional information could get the ball rolling on the case once again. If this sounds familiar to any of you, please don't be shy. Your information can make a world of difference. In 2014, Evansdale police announced that they were dedicating a portion of their website to be specifically aimed at releasing news and information about the ongoing investigation, the murder of Lyra Cook and Elizabeth Collins, which had become their biggest and most infuriating unsolved case by far. This page can be found at evansdalepolice.org/latest on Lyric and Elizabeth.php and includes information about the investigation as well as a suspect profile which was made public for the first time. This profile was created with the help of the FBI's Behavioral Analyst Unit and concluded that the alleged culprit of Lyric and Elizabeth was a local that blended in with the Evansdale or Blackhawk County community who acted upon an opportunity to abduct the 2 girls. Someone who is undoubtedly familiar with the Myers Lake area as well as Seven Bridges Park, meaning that they are unlikely to have been a transient or a wanderer. Police insist that the location where the bodies were found, Seven Bridges Park, was without a doubt familiar to the killer, as it is still relatively isolated and not well known outside of those from the region, indicating that the killer is, or was, a local. Someone who would use quiet coercion to convince the girls to go with him and her, either a trick or ruse of sorts, or some kind of threat of violence. Someone who is likely facing significant stress in their life, legal issues, mental health problems, issues with a spouse, etc., who decided to lash out at two strangers instead of those close to them. Either someone who followed along closely with the investigation or someone that tried to distance themselves as much as possible. Someone that had likely attempted abductions in the past and had likely expressed interest in underage girls. And finally, there were likely someone that may have attempted to alter their own physical appearance as well as the appearance of their vehicle in the immediate aftermath, which again was in July 2012. In November of 2016, in the small town of Onawa, Iowa, a little over 200 miles to the west of Evansdale, two elementary school girls returned home in a hurry. They told their family that a man had attempted to lure them into a vehicle just moments prior. So this is 2016 now, November, months before the Delphi murders. Not that many months. Two of their older relatives and a neighbor decided to jump into a vehicle and chase after the vehicle that had attempted to lure the two girls, which was just now leaving their neighborhood. The car, a silver gray 2000 Ford Focus, was easy to catch up to, but the driver tried to distance himself from the pursuing vehicle when he realized that he had been caught. The car of young adults was able to keep pace with the man in the Ford Focus, a middle-aged white man with dark hair and a goatee who appeared a little heavyset. When the vehicles pulled alongside one another, the man behind the wheel of the Ford Focus claimed that he was an undercover police officer and threatened violence against his pursuers. Yet they stayed on him for several miles, pursuing him out of town until police were able to show up and arrest the man. The man's identity was revealed as 58-year-old Jeff Altmeyer, who lived in Ankeny, Iowa. He had served in the National Guard between 77 and 83 and was, by all accounts, a pretty regular guy. He had been married for over 30 years and now had two adult children that had moved out of his house. He had spent decades working for security companies before becoming an independent security consultant. At the time of his arrest in 2014, Altmeyer was working as a traveling auto damage field inspector, which allowed him to travel through Iowa and the Midwest pretty regularly. Jeff Altmeyer was arrested and charged with trying to entice children, a crime that he had apparently been committing all over Iowa, not only Onawa, which resides in Monona County, but also in Jasper and Grundy counties. In fact, between May and December of 2016, Altmeyer had attempted to lure dozens of underage girls into his car, at times actually succeeding. Some of these girls were let go a block or two away, but on at least two occasions, Altmeyer had sexually assaulted these victims who ranged in age from 6 to 13 years old. Man, he got off too easy by just being arrested. What the heck? Eventually, Altmeyer was sentenced to life in prison for his offenses, but investigators continue to believe that he may be responsible for other crimes. Their rationale is that criminals generally don't start at the age of 58, and that him having successfully gotten away with a crime might have emboldened him to lash out in a spree of sorts, which is what he was eventually convicted of. Yeah, but in general, though, don't most violent criminals escalate? They don't de-escalate, typically, unless this guy's the outlier. So if he's still letting his victims go several blocks later, I mean, is this a guy that could have previously committed murder? I mean, maybe, again, this guy could be an outlier, but generally that probably wouldn't be the number one statistical likelihood. Mitch Mortvedt, the head of field operations for the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, stated about Altmeyer, it's very concerning. Well, also, if he committed all these crimes previously, like, how is he out and free? Or did they not find out about it until after the arrest later? It's very concerning to us when you have an individual like that has the access that he does through his employment at the time to basically roam the state or roam the Midwest. Following his conviction for numerous abductions and abduction attempts, Jeff Altmeyer had been investigating investigated as a potential lead in the Evansdale case. However, nothing definitive has linked him to the crimes as of yet. At least nothing that officials feel confident in releasing to the public, keeping themselves pretty tight-lipped about their ongoing investigation. Mike Rohrkas, special agent with the Iowa DCI, addressed Altmaier's possible connection to the Evansdale case in no certain terms just a couple of years ago in 2017. Quote, "The most I would say is that he is one of our leads, and I will leave it at that," end quote. Belle Plaine, Iowa, is a small town roughly 40 miles south of Evansdale, which is really in the middle of nowhere. Built as a railroad town in the middle of the Civil War, the population has languished between 2,000 and 3,000 in the decade since, and the town itself hasn't changed much over the past half-century or so. On May 4th, 2018, Belle Plaine would make national headlines for perhaps the worst of reasons. That day, a Union Pacific train was heading from Chicago, Illinois to Nebraska along one of the region's dedicated coal rails, and everything was going along swimmingly until shortly before 5 a.m. That is when it was reported that an incident had occurred involving two people, a mother and a son, both of whom had lost their lives in a tragic accident along the railroad. The casualties were later identified as 35-year-old Teresa Gerleman and her 8-year-old son Henry Fields, both of whom were locals. The incident was initially reported as a tragic accident, but as soon as police began to learn more, they realized that this was no accident. Due to interviews with Teresa's friends and family, which gave them context for her deteriorated mental state, as well as footage obtained from the train, police labeled this ordeal as a murder-suicide, with Teresa having killed herself and her son by pulling him onto the tracks at the last moment, ending both of their lives in an instant. Okay, this incident led to a weeks-long investigation which aimed to understand why this woman had decided to end both her son's life as well as her own. Police were able to learn that 35-year-old Teresa Gerleman had been struggling through numerous mental health issues and had been going through counseling in addition to being put on a number of medications. During meetings with support specialists in the months prior to the incident, Teresa had reportedly told them that she felt like standing in front of a train, and had even made mention of knowledge she possessed pertaining to a high-profile double murder from the region. Wow. So this is 2018. As you can already imagine, this was the unsolved double murder from Evansdale, which was just 40 or so miles away from Belle Plaine. Teresa had spoken to her counselors about supposed evidence she held in her possession. A 6-page letter she claims had been written by the killer, or killers, of Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins. These were apparently men that Teresa had hung around in the months and years prior, and according to her in this letter, these men had confessed to the double murder in explicit detail. Following the death of Teresa and her son, a search warrant was executed on her home. In the search warrant, police used specific details obtained from Teresa's specialists, including a tidbit about this supposed letter from one of her counselors named Julie Croft. When asked to be more specific, Julie stated that it had to do with the two girls in the woods near Evansdale. During the subsequent search of Teresa's property, several of her belongings were taken away by investigators, including notebooks, sealed envelopes, and multiple cell phones. She had multiple cell phones? However, it seems like whatever information police were able to obtain from Teresa's belonging, including presumably this from this letter, was irrelevant or simply outdated. Police claim that they were unable to learn anything new from Teresa Gerleman's belongings, adding that her deteriorated mental state had likely made it hard for her to differentiate between what was real and what was fiction. They referred to the letter in her possession as containing old information that they had received in the past, nothing new or revelatory. I mean, that's kind of weird. So there was information about the case, and they said it was old information. So were these tips that didn't pan out or false confessions? It is unknown if the death of Teresa Gerleman or her son Henry Fields was linked in any way to the unsolved double murder in Evansdale. However, it led to a brief resurgence of interest in the case and remains a bizarre incident that many believe might share some connection, no matter how tentative. I mean, and obviously tragic in every sense of the word. I mean, this is just... wow. In the nearly 7 years since the murder of Lyric, at the time of this writing, that this post was made, Since the murder of Lyra Cook Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins, Evansdale has yet to shake the memory of their murder. In fact, most discussions about Evansdale eventually turn to a discussion of the case itself, which continues to shock those in the region close to a decade after the fact. The current state of the investigation is open, with police having interviewed more than 1,000 people in search for answers. This includes more than 300 sex offenders from the region. Man, that's a lot of scumbags. And investigators continue to stockpile tips from the public, having obtained thousands of them in the years since Lyric and Elizabeth disappeared. This case has been linked to a number of similar cases throughout the Midwest, including some I've already mentioned in this episode. Many think that the case bears many similarities to the spree perpetrated by Jeff Outmeyer, while others continue to believe that Michael Klunder remains a bit more likely culprit. Others even point to the high-profile murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty Gerleman from 2017 over in Delphi, Indiana, as possibly being related. I haven't covered that case in the podcast yet, but I will very soon, and I'll explore this connection in more detail then. However, police continue to look for more answers and are quick to state that this will never become a cold case. Evansdale Police Chief Jeff Jensen stated just a short time ago, quote, "I don't want to consider this a cold case because we are still actively working on it. Nobody has put it on the shelf and said we're done with this. We're still scratching for every little lead we can get," end quote. A reward of $170,000 for information leading to the arrest and prosecution of the person or persons responsible. This was a reward raised primarily by private interests, with more than $100,000 being contributed by an anonymous donor and $20,000 being added to the fund by the FBI. See, this is really sad. One guy put up $100K, and that's it, and the reward's only at $170K. So most of that reward is one guy. $20K is from the FBI. So only $50K is from just the pool of people. Really? That's as high as they can get that reward? I mean, come on. Like, all these scumbag millionaires and billionaires can't even contribute? Like, what? Yeah, this is just, like, they really don't care about all of this. Yeah, I mean, it's a point I go on about in many podcasts. Like, all these billionaires out there, like, a couple $100K is like $20 to them. And they just don't care. The loved ones of Lyric and Elizabeth continue to hope for some kind of resolution in this case, remaining as active as possible in the community in the hunt for their loved one's killer. In October of this year, 2019, Lyric would have been celebrating her 18th birthday. Perhaps she would be moving on to college or whatever the next chapter of her life would have been. The same goes for Elizabeth Collins, who would be turning 16, perhaps obtaining her driver's license and entering the thick of her high school career. This unknown killer has taken that away from these two cousins, in addition to a lifetime of memories that would have been shared with their loved ones. Okay, so yeah, a lot of information there. So now let's go a little deeper and look at this clip here regarding family dynamics, because this is some mind-shocking information here.
In the early days of the investigation, Heather Collins says they faced lots of questions from investigators.
DCI comes in, they question you, like, nonstop. What were you doing at this time? What were you doing there? I see that you made a call. At this time, I'm like, well, call Drew to let him know that I can't find them at wherever. And, so it was a lot of those questions. And then it just goes into, like, the neighborhood, like looking at people in the neighborhood, just DCI and the cops, like, saying, trying to keep us updated. We've looked at these people, is there anybody that you can think of? They get lists of all your friends that you hang out with all the time, and they're all, dissected. It was really hard because my younger sister, that was Larry's mom, she was missing, MIA the whole time. Not like missing, just not around. So that just made it harder because I wanted my sister to be, there with me. And we're going through this, we're both going through this huge, devastating time, and she wasn't there. And they wouldn't talk to the police. They wouldn't talk to DCI. We had a meeting every night at 5, and she wasn't there. Nor where was her husband. So that was really, really hard. Um, and just them having been into drugs and stuff. It was, just like, who were they around? Do they owe anybody money? Is somebody get out of prison that they had like narked on? I just hope and pray all the time that her and her husband, Dan, they're divorced now, but her and Dan didn't have anything to do with it. I'm already devastated as it is. I don't know how much more devastated I could be to know that they were involved in any way. Or because of their drug use. Like, because of their drug use, they were involved.
When the girls were found, Heather and her husband Drew chose to not see their daughter's body or find out how they were killed.
We only want the killer and the people that worked on the case to know. We don't want anybody else to know. We felt that would be like the safest way. Like, it couldn't get leaked out, And then we had Elizabeth buried, her body buried. Misty, which was very, very upsetting still, as she had her body cremated. Which to me, like, Elizabeth can still, if there's some test or something like that, they can still do tests on Elizabeth. They can on Lyric. Her body's cremated. I tried talking to Misty about that, like begging her not to have that. And she didn't listen. So when she did something like that, to me is like, what are you hiding? Like, what are you hiding? Like, science keeps growing. You see it all the time in cases. Like, what are you hiding? You want her body cremated. Like, then that, like, also gives me more suspicion. Like, why would you have her body cremated? It's still the same. It baffles me.
To this day, that relationship between sisters is broken.
I met with her for the first time in years last week. We were out at the grave and spoke with her. That was the first time in probably 4 years, 4.5. I would go in like spurts, try to talk to her and that kind of stuff. I don't want to be around the chaos. I'm never done drugs. I can't be in part of that. I can't be in that lifestyle. That's not me. So then I would have to step back out. And then I would see her doing really well, so I would step back in. But it never lasted very long, so then back out. And then this last time I'm done. I just can't do it. It's really hard on me. It's very trying. Now she has 3 little nieces, I have 3 little nieces. She has 3 daughters and younger ones, and I don't even know them.
Your relationship with Drew, because people deal with these things very differently.
So with Drew, we ended up getting a divorce. You both just deal with everything so differently. I say kind of like grow apart in ways. He grieved. His grieving was just not engaging, kind of just sleeping and being on the couch a lot. So he was there, but he wasn't. So it was hard to deal with, and then it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of like spun out of control. It was just like, I guess it's just what it is.
How do you get updates now? Do you get updates on the case?
I don't get updates anymore. If there's an update, they give it to Drew. Because some updates can be so hopeful, and then it doesn't come through. And then they're like, let's say 2 days later, they're like, sorry. So with that, he'll kind of wait a little bit, and he's like, well, they thought that they had something, but it ended up being nothing. So he does a lot of that. And I'm sure it's just kind of protect me. He feels, one, crazy person's enough. I guess one person not ever sleeping or one person doing nothing but sleeping is enough.
Do you feel like it's been 10 years?
In some ways, yes, but some ways, no. Only yes, because you get older, you know, but some ways, no, because it's a nightmare to me every morning. It's the same thing, you know. I still have another day without one of my children, you know. A piece of us is missing. You know, a piece of our family is gone and not here. And we don't know who did it. We don't, you know. The only thing we know is that she's in heaven with Lyric, and, you know, they're having the time of their life, and, you know, we're down here just trying to get by each day.
So, in that interview, Heather is stating basically that there's some suspicion in the direction of Misty. I mean, she doesn't outright state that she thinks she's directly involved. She hopes she's not. But she clearly stated in her own words that there's some suspicion there. I mean, I don't really know what to make of that because, again, grieving parents, I mean, they might see things that aren't there. But on the other hand, they also know these people a lot more than we do from the outside looking in. So, and again, just looking at raw statistics, I mean, it's raw statistics would state that whoever abducted and killed them either knew them or knew someone who knew them. It's hard to argue against that. And now, but here's the other thing, like a lot of people are involved in drugs. That doesn't mean they're automatically connected to an abductor and a killer who also may be involved in drugs. Because, again, that baseline, a certain percentage of people just, you know, so there's that direct connection might not be there, just even if they are involved in drugs. So, some interesting responses here on the Evansdale Murders subreddit regarding this interview also. Just, she said in a relationship with her sister Misty has been plagued by suspicion and unanswered questions in the years since the daughters were killed. Quote, I met with her for the first time in years last week when we were out at the grave. I spoke with her. That was probably the first time in probably 4 years. I would go in spurts to try to talk to her, that kind of stuff. I don't want to be around chaos, Heather said in a June interview. I've never done drugs. I can't be part of that. I can't be in that lifestyle. That's not me. Then I would have to step back out. And then when I would see her doing rel, I would step back in, but it never lasted very long, so back out. This last time, I was just like done. End quote. Heather fears Misty and Dan's involvement with drugs may have played a role in the case. You know what's weird though? It's like, yeah, they have, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to again, brain fingerprint scan. I brought it up in the other podcast, like, if they have nothing to do with it, they would have no problem being subjected to a brain fingerprint scan. Another quote here, they can still do tests on Elizabeth, they can't on Lyric. Her body is cremated. I tried talking to Misty about that, begging her not to have that, and she didn't listen. When she did something like that, it's me like, what are you hiding? What are you hiding? Science keeps growing. You see it all the time in cases. What are you hiding? You want her body cremated? It gives me more suspicion. Why did you have her body cremated? It's still, to this day, it baffles me. Now, here's the thing. So these are sisters, too, so you would think that family practices would be the same, but let's say they weren't. Let's say maybe the Morrissey side or whatever, if they cremate all of their loved ones, then that's less suspicious. If they don't, and never did, and this was the only one, then it's a little bit more suspicious. This is very much in line with the local discussion. The local suspicion is that the Collins have suspected the Morrisseys all along. So, what do I make of this statement here on the Reddit? It's not that the locals think the Morrisseys are responsible. They're just saying that the Collinses think that. Not that the locals think. I mean, or they do or they don't. I have no idea. But in this particular comment, they're saying that from the get-go, supposedly the Collinses have suspected the Morrisseys. I would like to get the thoughts from the grandmother. I don't know if she's ever spoken publicly, but... So here's an interesting write-up on the people discussing the Morrisseys' involvement, not that they intentionally killed anybody. It may not have been drug-related, but the Morrisseys may still have some responsibility for what happened, such as exposing the girls to whoever targeted them in the first place, like unknowingly. The Morrisseys were cooking and distributing meth from their house, which with both girls in the house, so the girls were exposed to some unsavory people. They also frequently did drugs in the house and had house parties, again, while one or both of the girls were over there. Let's not forget, just going missing is enough of a message. Some people find it odd that the hunters that found the bodies worked for the family of the man that reportedly found the bikes. Okay, alright. I think, what? No, the mind-shocking stack of coincidences, I can't do that one. That's too much. That's too much. I mean, yeah, sure, this isn't New York City with millions of people, but we're still talking thousands upon thousands of people, if not tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people in that area. Okay, hold on a second. Some people find it odd that the hunters that found the bodies worked for the family of the man that reportedly found the bikes. Okay, so is that directly, or did this guy have a business that had like 100 employees? In which case, I guess that's okay. But if he didn't, and there's just a couple people, and this one group of people connected found the bikes, and they're connected to the people that found the bodies. Ooh, that's a tough one, man. That's like in the Johnny Gosch case. Supposedly the Gosch's neighbors in Des Moines, Iowa, were the ones that found the writing Johnny Gosch was here all the way in Denver, Colorado. I mean, that's kind of weird. Out of all the people that could have reported that, I mean, it's just weird. The coincidence stack here. One of the theories is that the bodies were not randomly found, but someone was pointed in the right direction to find them. That also reminds me of the Amy Mihalovic case. If you haven't checked out the Amy Mihalovic series on MindShock, check that out. So supposedly the body was left in a particular spot where it would be seen from the road, as if someone wanted that body found at that particular time, months and months later. So, yeah. While Evansdale is a small community and there are a lot of interconnections between some people, Seven Bridges is not part of Evansdale. And it's actually fairly odd that someone from Evansdale found the bodies, let alone someone with tangential ties to the family. So wait a second. So those hunters didn't even live in that area. They're from Evansdale. And they also happen to work connect to the family. Okay, that's even weirder. Unless, of course, this particular member has like 100 employees, then that's slightly less weird. But if it's just a couple people, I don't know what to make of that. Seven Bridges does not get heavy traffic, but it does get traffic from other local communities. Some are similar size to Evansdale, but much, much closer. And some are a similar distance from the park as Evansdale, but much, much larger. I'm not saying this is conclusive, but that it doesn't rule out that the idea that the Morrisseys were involved. It also should be noted that the man that found the bikes was the best man of the police chief that was fired, suspected due to how he handled the case. Okay, alright, what? Can this case get any weird? I was not expecting this level of mind shock on this case. This is unbelievable. The guy that found the bikes is connected to the police chief who was fired, supposedly for how he's handled the case. So the guy that found the bikes, the best man of the police chief, and his family employs the guys that found the bodies, and they're all from Evansdale, whereas this Seven Bridges Park is not part of Evansdale. It's off a ways, and there's plenty of other communities in that area that get heavy traffic at the park from there. So, okay, and then also keep in mind, earlier, supposedly the bodies were so well hidden that you can walk right by them and not see them. Which also leads credence to that someone was pointed to where they were. And they were not, connecting those two things. Because again, it had been stated officially, again, I went over the news reports, The bodies were so well hidden you can walk right by them and not see them. So does that mean that someone was pointed to them to be found on purpose? And now we have another possibly corrupt police chief involved here. So if this is some kind of ring involving police, again, for all the coincidence theorists and authority worshipping cultists out there that think it's impossible, check out the Johnny Gosch series, the Franklin scandal. You have police chiefs involved. You have mayors involved. You have actual lawsuits being won against them. $1 million plus judgments going all the way to the White House corruption. Yeah, this is dark stuff. Former FBI head Ted Gunderson, of course, exposed a lot of this. This is dark, dark stuff that's been exposed. It's been published in newspapers like the New York Times. This is not some kind of just crazy, insane theory on a GeoCities website. This is legitimate information. There's court documents. A lot of them are sealed, but you can find references to them and news reports in major newspapers like the New York Times referencing the judgments of them. So with this connection to the police chief, wow, I don't know what to make of that. That's crazy. So let me just do a quick aside before returning to that Reddit post. Des Moines Register, details emerge against fired Evansdale police chief, April 28, 2015. The recently fired Evansdale police chief was accused of misconduct ranging from creating a hostile work environment to his behavior in the workplace, according to a television station report. Documents obtained Monday through an open record request by KWWL-TV outline complaints against Kent Smock, who was fired April 14th in a closed city council meeting. Much of the information in the documents which come from Smock's personnel file has been withheld. I think these redacted letters tell enough of the story without causing unnecessary harm to the reputation of someone who is peripherally involved with this, Evansdale Mayor Doug Foss said. Smock had been with the department since 2012 and was leading the investigation of the abduction and slayings of 10-year-old Lyra Cook Morrissey and 8-year-old Elizabeth Collins. Their bodies were found in December 2012 in the Seven Bridges Wildlife Area in rural northeastern Iowa. They had gone missing 5 months earlier while riding their bikes in Evansdale, about 22 miles away. The investigation has yet to turn up any suspects, persons of interest, or motives. According to the documents, 7 officers signed a complaint about Smock's behavior, saying he lacked, quote, honesty, integrity, and respect for police employees of the city of Evansdale, end quote. Officers also accused Smock of an inappropriate relationship with an unnamed person and interactions that left employees fearful of violence. What? Foss declined the television station's request to comment specifically about the allegations. Smock had spent about a month and a half on extended leave prior to the termination, beginning around the time the complaints were filed in late February. I wasn't to try and keep things quiet, Foss said. At the time, Chief Smock had over 6 weeks of vacation, and we had discussed with him, and he agreed he needed some vacation time. Okay. Sergeant Jeff Jensen, who was acting police chief during Smock's leave, has maintained that role since Smock's firing. Okay, so if there is some kind of corruption, was he trying to keep the case from being solved? Some people allege that's what's going on in Delphi. Is there a ring involved here? Again, I urge everyone to check out the Johnny Gosch series. This is not as outlandish as it seems. We're even talking the same area, Iowa. So back to the Reddit here. Kidnapping from Myers Lake could actually be easier than killing and escaping at Myers Lake, especially if the killer convinced the girls to go with willingly. And again, if this is an individual that was at these drug parties and maybe even made some small talk with them, and there was some kind of base layer of comfort, or at least some kind of familiarity, just that they had spoken to this guy before maybe. Or, let's start thinking outside the box. Is it possible this was a man and a woman who kidnapped these girls? Obviously, there's a lot of sickos out there, and a female accomplice, or possibly even the female ringleader in certain cases, that could obviously make certain abductions of children perhaps easier with a female involved, for that false sense of security for luring. Even if you were stopped in the middle of trying to kidnap them, you may not even be guilty of a crime yet. That's really, really creepy to even think about. But if some of these would-be abductors and murderers are kind of smart, I mean, that is kind of true. Like, if you just kind of talk, if you just say something without actually attempting to lure them in any way, like ask them about the weather or ask for directions, technically it's not illegal to ask a minor for directions. I mean, that's supposedly how the Gosh kidnapping started as well. I mean, yeah, that's kind of weird. That's kind of scary to think about. Like, they can have a built-in escape plan. The location at Myers Lake would have been dicey at best to try to kill and escape. It's close enough to residential housing that screams would have been heard, and there are only 2 ways out of that area, both of which are long, narrow paths that have a fair amount of traffic on it. A smart criminal would have abducted the girls, then called off the killing if they thought they had been spotted. That would have still sent the message to Dan. And this is, again, assuming there is any message, because if these are just sickos that happen to see maybe one or both of the girls at some parties over the previous months through drug connections, they might have schemed up their own plot that has absolutely nothing to do with Dan. There's no message to be sent. They're just a couple of whack job sickos, or in this criminal circle, perhaps they know other criminal individuals, again, if we're talking some kind of snuff film ring, or, you know, things of that nature. Criminals might know other criminals who are involved with it. The girls may have been kidnapped and kept alive to put pressure on Dan to not cooperate with the police, and when he continued to cooperate, they were killed and the bodies left somewhere where the killer thought they could get away with it. I mean, that's another dark theory as well. It should also be noted that the 2 families have been at odds since this. Rather than a shared tragedy bringing them closer, they refused to be interviewed together. They did not I think there is one interview, at least one interview with the sisters together, though. They did not cooperate with each other in memorials. They did not interact with each other at public events such as parades, fundraising events, publicity events, or the dedication of a major memorial to the girls, which has all seemed very odd to the local community. Even when they show up to the same events, which is super rare, the families are notoriously distant and cold to each other, with very little intermingling. I mean, I don't know what to make of that, though, because that could be for a million other reasons. This interview is not the first sign that the families were distancing themselves over this. This is just the first significant public statement that directly confirms a pattern that the community has been talking about. So here's another interesting detail that I don't know has been made public yet. I don't know if this is true or not. Again, I'm going through the Reddit here. Dan was supposed to appear in court the day after the girls were abducted. It was a warning not to reveal any details about people or events he knew about, or next they would come after him. Either that, or they knew he had already revealed names and it was punishment. Okay, this is another coincidence for the second. If that's true, and that he did have a day in court and he was being pressured to supply names, because obviously he's got a lot of charges here, would they think he would plead, he would cooperate and name other names to get a lighter sentence? Then, I mean, that's clearly motive there. That is clearly motive, and would they wouldn't just abduct his daughter if there was, you know, they wouldn't want witnesses, so and also they might think it would work better because then they would have the pressure of his sister-in-law's family as well to make sure that he cooperated. Another post here, don't forget that the father of one of the girls was in custody and making a plea deal when the girls went missing, which is a bit more than a drug deal that went wrong or stolen drugs. It also might not be directly related to the drugs, but rather the people that spent time around the girls or that the girls were introduced. It may be as simple as one of the parents were friends with a monster that used that friendship to get access to the girls. Wow. I mean, so he was currently in custody in the middle of a plea deal. Yeah, I mean, that's a coincidence for sure. Like, if possible coincidence, but like, it seems almost too convenient and coincidental, especially when taking into account Derek German's history in the Delphi case and the rumor that Liberty German was actually going to the police station the following day to make a statement to police as well. So if this can be corroborated, like in terms of the Delphi case with Libby making a statement, that's damning. We of course have all the Derek German connections, that's damning. Ashley Garth losing custody of her kids, supposedly over being named by Derek German, and then her boyfriend Garrett Kurtz with the connection to Ron Logan's land. Again, I've gone over all of this. I mean, is it possible that a lot of these criminals simply know each other. Maybe this is kind of just a several degrees of separation, but not direct. Maybe these cases are related, but by several degrees of separation, and not the exact same person committing both crimes. I mean, is that a possibility? Another post here. I'm not convinced it was related to him making a plea deal personally, for most of the reasons you gave. Everything I know about the case in the area, though, seems to point to the fact that one or both of the girls knew the person that took them and cooperated with the abduction, at least at the start. The location they were taken from is a terrible place to abduct someone from, unless you have a way to abort the abduction. I'd be a lot more convinced of the plea deal angle if the girls turned up alive later. As it stands, Dan didn't seem to take the fall for anything, and there is no leverage on him to keep him from flipping after the girls turned up dead. That's a good point as well. Unless the names were already named before, as mentioned. Like I said, I think it's most likely that someone that the girls met before they took them, and possibly that this person has something over Dan or the family that convinced them not to provide everything they know to the cops. Furthermore, I mean, that could be a scenario. Another scenario, Dan might not even know who the person is, because let's say it's once removed. So he's got all these druggy scumbags hanging out at his house. One of these druggy scumbags sees the girl, and he has another druggy scumbag who Dan might have not even ever met. He just, again, criminals know each other. Druggy scumbags know a lot of other druggy scumbags. So this guy might know someone else who he never met. Maybe they're involved in some kind of snuff ring, or even that guy knows yet another guy. This could be 3 or 4 degrees removed, and they could be talking huge money for some kind of snuff film, whatever. And so it's just a tip that goes to another guy for a tip and another guy. So Dan might not even know 2 to 3 to 4 people in the chain, because he might not know that the guy that he knows is connected to all these other people, and if that guy never revealed it to him. So he wouldn't even know who to roll on. Just a thought. Is that the McGuire theory in the Evansdale case? So far, I think it might be. Another post here on Unresolved Mysteries, a great subreddit. This is from the Part 2 write-up by Just Passing By Sorry. 1 year ago, what happened to Lyric Cook Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins. They referenced a lot of information that we went over already. So this vehicle, this white SUV, was there between 11:30 and 12:30 p.m., July 13th, 2012. So that's pretty much the exact time range of when they would have been abducted. While nothing has been reported on the vehicle since the initial announcement, the likelihood that it was linked to the girl's abduction is high. Although it's not impossible that there was also another vehicle, and this could be a red herring vehicle. But obviously, 3 different people, if no other vehicles were reported, I mean, yes, you have to investigate the vehicle. It's not 100%, but yeah, it's very possible. What's interesting is here they're stated that investigators believe there is only one person involved in their murder and abduction. I don't know, and again, obviously there's no clarification on that. That's just a statement, but it's weird. I mean, in articles I've gone over in the Delphi case, I mean, Leesenby had said sometimes they believe that it's one person, sometimes they believe it's multiple people. They go back and forth in the theory. Here it's stating investigators believe there's only one person involved. I don't know how they determined that, of course. Also, in this February 3rd, 2015 press conference, Smock informed the public they did not currently have a suspect or a person of interest. Possible theories. Since the discovery of the girls' bodies in Seven Bridges Wildlife Park, some theories have arisen on who could be responsible. As touched on in Part 1, there are still some people who believe Dan Morrissey's, Lyric's father, criminal past is linked with the girls' abduction. While an unpopular theory, these individuals believe they must have been taken in reparation for money owed or payback for a bad batch of meth. They believe Dan refuses to give up a name to police so he won't have to deal with public backlash. Another theory alleges that their abductor could have been known to one or both of the girls, which is why he had to take both of them to prevent being identified. This person, possibly someone who worked at one of the girls' schools or just lived near one of their friends, would have been a complete stranger to the parents and totally off the radar to the police. He could be hiding in plain sight. But the most popular theory by far is that this is the work of a serial killer that has already struck again in Delphi. After the Delphi case went viral for the infamous audio and photo of the perpetrator, allegedly the perpetrator, many in the true crime community began to see parallels between the Delphi and Evansdale murders, particularly for the fact that both crimes had 2 young female victims. The crimes happened in broad daylight around local trails, and the bodies were found in isolated areas mainly frequented by hunters. Once the media caught on to this theory, it spread like wildfire, which prompted the Indiana State Police to start looking into the similarities. A little less than a month later, March 9th, 2017, Sergeant John Perrine from the Indiana State Police would officially dispel the rumors, saying, quote, "We have spoken with Iowa authorities about that case, just like we've spoken to many agencies with their unsolved cases. We're comparing notes. At this point, we do not have a connection with that case," end quote. Despite this, some people still believe the victim type and killer's MO is too similar for the murders to not be connected. Again, just the FBI stats alone would seem to highly suggest that. It's just so unlikely. Some even go as far as to claim the secrecy around the intimate details of both cases is because they have found signatures from the same killer and are waiting for those signatures to pop up in another crime. However, at the end of the day, neither police agencies would have any reason to lie about the connection, and they have access to all the evidence that the public doesn't. Occam's razor says 2 different killers and 2 sets of opportunistic victims. No, it does not. Again, another misuse of Occam's razor. I mean, is there anything more misused in the true crime community than Occam's razor? I mean, Occam's razor specifically states that, this is an appeal to ignorance logical fallacy with the access to all the evidence, the presupposition that law enforcement is not compromised, not corrupt, etc. There's just not involved in any of these rings. You're just ignoring all of this. Occam's razor clearly states that you go with the more complex solution if it fits the evidence better. When you have too limited evidence to know whether it fits better or not, you can't apply Occam's razor because you don't have 2 equally viable scenarios that equally fit the evidence, in which Occam's razor, this remnant of medieval science, would state to use the one with the fewest assumptions. Not that Occam's razor is wrong, but it's based on there's plenty of complexities in nature that seemingly would not need to be complex, but it just happens to be the truth. The truth is whatever it is. If it's complex, it's complex. But you don't have 2 equally viable theories equally fitting the evidence available, so Occam's razor is not applicable here. And it's usually not applicable. I've never even seen a scenario where it would be applicable. Okay, continuing on here, the impact on the girls' families. The girls' families have tried to cope as best as they could given the situation, but the deaths understandably took its toll on everyone. In an interview given days after the girls' bodies were discovered, Heather Collins stated that her now ex-husband as well as their 3 other younger children are attending counseling. Heather also mentions that she copes through praying, stating, "That's where I get my peace, that's where I get my strength." In another interview given 2 years after the girls were found, Drew Collins expresses, "A lot of what we are trying to do is put our lives back together, me and Heather and the kids." And all of that becomes harder and harder as time goes by. Holding your marriage together, holding your family together, it's hard on marriage, it's hard on day-to-day life, all around a tough situation. Elizabeth's parents, Drew and Heather Collins, drifted apart after the stress from Elizabeth's disappearance, and eventually the couple decided a divorce would be best at the end. The 2 still remain friendly and cordial to this day, hoping and waiting for the day their daughter's killer is caught. On the other side, Lyric's parents have had a harder time dealing with the grieving process. As mentioned in Part 1, Dan Morrissey was facing criminal charges at the time of Lyric's disappearance and had been temporarily released from custody to be with his family. While out of custody, he experienced 2 relapses. One on October 2nd, Lyric's birthday, and one on December 5th, the day the girls' bodies were found. Along with using meth, Dan soon began to manufacture it again. A year after his daughter's disappearance, he would face his judgment day. At the sentencing, he told the judge, "My problem at the time wasn't drugs. My problem was grief. I really still can't accept it." And again, just going back to what I guess I'm going to call the McGuire theory in the Evansdale case, he really might not know that he knows a possible link in the perpetrators of this crime, because if this was someone who was just hanging around the house and saw the girls, who knew another criminal who either himself or possibly yet a 3rd or 4th criminal down the chain knew somebody and they orchestrated this, and he might never even know. After entering a plea agreement on 3 separate drug charges, Dan was sentenced to 90 years in prison. That's more than people who harm children get. He got 90 years for drugs. with a maximum of 30 years served before being eligible for all. Meanwhile, this other scumbag who assaults children in his car and then releases them blocks away, he was free to do that. And all of these hundreds of sex offenders who harm children, they're free to be out and about. And he gets 90 years for drug charges. I mean, this is crazy. Previously an addict, Misty Cook Morrissey worked hard for years to change her life and Lyric's life for the better, and she did so successfully. However, after Lyric disappeared, Misty was extremely distraught. She wanted to numb the pain, to disassociate from the situation, so she began using again. This abuse would soon send her on a path downwards, which would lead her to her arrest in 2013 and being sentenced to 10 years in prison for delivery of meth. But fortunately, she was released after serving only 1 year, and she was determined to pick up the pieces again. She told KCCI News in a 2017 interview after her release that she can't even look at pictures of her daughter Lyric because the pain is too much to bear. I think about her all the time. I don't think I deal with it very well still. I mean, who could? Misty is sober now and has begun a new life in St. Lucas, Iowa, raising baby chicks with her boyfriend Zach Frazier and a new baby girl named Abigail. In another 2017 interview with the Des Moines Register, Misty describes the past 5 years as a kind of rebirth. After Lyric, I didn't think I would be willing to have any more kids, and God had other plans, and we were really, really blessed to have her in my life, Cook said in a phone interview. It's amazing. This post actually continues to talk about the Gerleman murder-suicide, which we went over. Another interesting tidbit here, Elizabeth Collins' father stated here, every day they tell me, every day they go through another person, it narrows the search. If they can get 2 or 3 people off the list a month, then they can also concentrate on other people that they haven't taken off the list. Wow, so they must have a really long list then. There has to be somebody that knows something that is holding information, Collins said. I don't think anyone can do this without someone knowing or talking about it. I am just waiting for that day and that phone call every time the phone rings. I am thinking it will be solved soon, he said. I get that feeling anyway. I don't know why, but I think it will be solved, and I think it will be solved even this year or next year. So I think he made that statement July 13th, 2020, in which case that would not be accurate. But perhaps it was 2021. Some posts here. Law enforcement has stated that Delphi and this case are not connected. And a response, but if you look at the stats, referring to the FBI stats, it becomes clear that they almost have to be related. Literally, what are the odds that they're not? And also, I still can't help but think about the other case where the guy abducted the 2 girls, he killed one of them, the other one escaped. It makes me think there's a ring, and these psychopaths are almost trying to brag about, can they kidnap and murder 2 people, and also possibly be part of some kind of snuff film where they film it and share it with each other. Because what else could account for these kind of long odds? I mean, in over a quarter of a century, this has happened 15 times or less. And now all of a sudden there's 3 within a few years in the same general area? I mean, that's a bridge too far. To think that they're all not connected, it's weird. Now, I'm not saying directly connected with the same perpetrator, but it could explain the odds if these scumbags all talk to each other online or something of that nature, or if there's some kind of ring. Okay, so now we're going to get to some of the most mind-shocking theories to close out this episode here. This is a post by Hunting Bridge Guy. Disclaimer, every person of interest mentioned below is innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. The following points previously raised by Reddit users Neither Coyote, Ruth the Bee, and Sad Tomato 2 hint at a very sinister connection. 1. Lizzie's parents had a convicted sex offender, Buzz Anderson, lead the parade for the missing girls and then continued a relationship with him. Heather Collins posted holiday photos including him on her social media account for years after. He was convicted of kidnapping and sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl. His defense was that she was a hired prostitute. Then Drew Collins, father of Lizzie and husband at the time, starts a push campaign about making sure all sex offenders are registered while having a convicted one near his other children. They have since gotten divorced. Wow. And Buzz Anderson, this case was actually reported in the newspapers. I think it was in the 80s. So this is public knowledge reported in public newspapers. So that's pretty crazy. Okay, point 2 here. I think Ted Gamerdinger finding the bikes. His name is Gamerdinger? Gamerdinger. Finding the bikes and being Kent Smock's best man 20 years prior is odd. Kent Smock's, of course, the former Evansdale chief of police who was fired. I think the hunters who found the bodies being employed by Gamerdinger even more odd. So the guy finds the bikes, the guy's employees find the body. And this guy is Kent Smock's best man. I think the family asking that convicted pedophile to be the head of the parade for the missing girls the first year was sickening. I think the entire police force demanding Kent Smock be removed from the PD and lose his fire captain position spoke volumes. He is involved, and he scrambled the crime scene to protect himself. The chief lost his wife and his 20-year career right after the FBI took over this case. Wow, that would be damning if law enforcement is involved. And does he have other friends in law enforcement connected to Delphi that don't want any of these cases solved? 3, Ted Gamerdinger told the news and the police he saw the bikes and had to swerve around them at 12:30 p.m. and that according to Lyric's mother, that's where police say the firemen found them at 4 p.m. Ted Gamerdinger was police chief Kent Smock's best man in his wedding 25 years ago. Chief Smock, who led this investigation, was asked to be removed for violent tendencies from his entire police force. He has since divorced his wife and married a fellow officer from a neighbor town. That same month, a 25-year council member abruptly quit less than 30 days before he was scheduled to retire. What is that? Whoa, that's kind of weird. Now, what is the pension involved with that, or any kind of benefit? So did he not get them because he retired 30 days earlier, or did he get them anyway and just simply retired for other reasons? Or is there a connection to Chief Smock there? That's weird. Point 4, it should be noted that the people, called hunters, who found the bodies were a family of 3. A wife, a husband, and an adult son. The father worked at a place called Gamerdinger Heating and Air. The man who spoke to the newspaper, the WCF, who says he saw the bikes abandoned at Myers Lake at 12:30 p.m. is named Ted Gamerdinger. How coincidental. So again, how many employees does Gamerdinger Heating and Air have? Because if it's just them, that's weird. But if there's hundreds of employees, that's a little less weird. Still, the amount of connections here is just, it's weird. Also, what? Regarding the dates, they both happened on the 13th, but also, if you swap the month for the year, because Evansdale was ending in a 2, Delphi ends in a 7. If you swap the 2 and the 7, you get 7/13/2012 for Evansdale, and you get 2/13/2017 for Delphi. So that's even more bizarre because it's not just the same day, it's the swapping of the month for the year. Is this just too much of a mind shock? This is too much mind-shocking material now. One more follow-up post here. I know we got a lot to go over, but we got to round this out here. But Ruth the Bee posted some very interesting information regarding Dan's plea here. So why did the state offer him a plea bargain of 8 years? Why did he accept it, then decline it? Why did the judge seem to have a grudge and give him 90 years without a trial? Okay, hold on a second. So is Ruth the Bee alleging here? So that Dan had the day, he was in court the day after the abduction. So they're abducted. Now he's in court. So did he agree to the plea deal before they were abducted? And then now does he not agree to the plea deal? And now the judge all of a sudden gives him 90 years without a trial when 8 years was on the table? So he goes from 8 to 90. Is that for not releasing names? And is that connected to the kidnapping at what at the time was a kidnapping, later became a murder? Without knowing when they were murdered, were they murdered immediately that day? Or was it much later, if they were being kept alive as some kind of some kind of an insurance on Dan. So that's it for now. Yeah, this is quite a baffling case that needs to be solved as well. And this is without even getting into the Flora fire, yet another tragic case with multiple young children being killed in a fire under suspicious circumstances with connections to officials in the area. I mean, this entire area has just been plagued with tragedies that seem to have these weird links to law enforcement. I mean, it's just really weird. Law enforcement and drugs, and just a lot of shady dealings across the board. So make of that what you will. Hope you guys found another edition of MindShock True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Help us get more mind-shocking content out there and keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MindShock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. You are listening to the Delphi Murders case series. This is episode 41, the Evansdale Connection Timeline. So we will be taking a look at the Evansdale timeline. And obviously in the Delphi case, the timeline is critical. In this case, I believe it is critical as well. And there are some details that I believe have just not gotten the focus they deserve, including sightings of the girls going away from the park, as well as distances and usual versus unusual behavior of the bike rides, including security footage showing the girls. So, lot to discuss, and we will of course do so in typical MindShock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront, unlike any other podcast out there. If you want to help support the podcast, help keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Help support the channel that way. Also, like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast, depending on your tier. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for notifications. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Okay, so here's a breakdown from the Evansdale Murders subreddit, quite astute breakdown here, of the general timeline of events, and then we will be getting into specifics afterwards. So this was posted by Nichols Resolution 4 years ago. July 13th, 2012, Elizabeth Collins and Lyric Cook Morrissey reported missing. Grandmother saw them riding their bikes at approximately 12:15 p.m. in downtown Evansdale. They were seen on Broven Boulevard in Evansdale and spotted again at about 1 p.m. on Gilbert Drive near Myers Lake. The family began looking for them at 2 and called the police at 2:48. Police came and hundreds of volunteers showed up to search. The bikes were found near the lake and it was partially drained. There were ground and water searches in and around lakes and trails. Phone alerts went out. Search had FBI dive teams, infrared-equipped aircraft, scent trail, and cadaver dogs. Police even followed sanitation trucks. Wow, that's a good idea. So this looks pretty thorough here. Bicycles were found at approximately 5 p.m. on a trail near the southeast corner of Myers Lake. Elizabeth's purse was found about 25 feet away on the other side of a fence. December 5th, 2012, the girls' bodies were found in a wooded area approximately 25 miles north in the Seven Bridges Wildlife Park in Bremer County. And I'm just going to add a very, very interesting detail is supposedly, and here's what's curious. I didn't go over this in the previous episode on Evansdale, the first major episode in the Evansdale case. So the people that found the bodies, so-called hunters, they were the ones employed by Ted Gamerdinger, who was the best man of Kent Smocks, the sheriff who actually was fired for shady dealings. Ted Gamerdinger is the one who found the bicycles. So Ted Gamerdinger, the best man of the sheriff, who's later fired for shady dealings, in this case, in Evansdale, his employees were the so-called hunters who found the bodies, but there's actually another detail here. Apparently, these were not hunters. So, supposedly, I don't know where this information is coming from, but supposedly this was their first time hunting ever. And where the bodies were found is in a really obscure area that nobody ever travels. And they were supposedly covered, like, it was stated that you could walk right by them and not see them. So how did they find these bodies? And this is their first time hunting ever, and they just happen to find these bodies, like they're that good at looking at the ground, because you could just walk by the area and not see the bodies at all anyway. And yet somehow these employees of Ted Gamerdinger, the guy that first saw the bikes of the missing children, they happen to be his employees, and this is also the best man of the former sheriff who's fired as soon as the FBI takes over this case. What does everybody make of that? Is that mind-shocking or what? And why is nobody talking about this? Isn't this kind of weird? Nobody finds this weird? I mean, like, it's kind of weird. And so Evansdale population is quite small. In 2020, it was 4,767. So somewhere around 4,700 throughout the decade per year. However, Waterloo, which is right there, has a population of approximately 68,000. And Cedar Falls, also right there, 41,000. So we're talking over 100,000 people in the general vicinity. And the people that found the bodies are employees of the Evansdale Police Chief's best man. Okay, let's continue on here before people's brains explode. June 24th, 2013, 3 witnesses tell law enforcement they saw an older model, large, clunky white SUV, possibly an old Ford Bronco or Chevy Suburban. 2 witnesses said they saw it between 2 bike trail signs, while the other said they saw it near the woods just a few hundred feet away from where the bodies were found. Okay, so there's more detail here. We went over the SUV in the previous episode, supposedly an overlooked tip. Or was this whole thing botched from the get-go? And if the police chief is involved or is covering for someone, did he kind of manipulate this whole ruse and possibly contaminate not just wherever the abduction occurred, but also where the bodies were found, and instructed these people to find them? I mean, statistically, what are the chances first-time hunters go that far off the beaten path? I mean, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, and they're connected to the sheriff. I mean, it's all kind of weird. I mean, I really don't know what to make of it. These are mind-shocking coincidences. I mean, the coincidence theorists must be having a field day here. So with this further information that there's 3, not 2 witnesses on the SUV, and one of them actually saw it just a few hundred feet from where the bodies were found? Wait a second. Saw it where? It's not stated here. From or the bike, did they miss? Is that a typo? From where, is that from the bikes were found? Yeah, it must be from the bikes, because all 3 were consistent with the time being between 11:30 and 12:30. Okay, so that's a typo. So a few hundred feet from where the bikes were found. The FBI BAU unit stated the following. The offender is familiar with both Myers Lake and Seven Bridges Wildlife Area in Bremer County. The offender selected Seven Bridges because he was familiar with how secluded the area is. The offender blends in with and may be part of the Evansdale, Bremer, and surrounding communities. The perpetrator most likely used quiet coercion to gain compliance, such as a ruse or threats of violence to get the girls to leave with him. During July of 2012, the perpetrator may have been experiencing stress due to spousal problems, financial difficulties, legal trouble, employment difficulties, or mental health issues. Well, I mean, how could they not be experiencing mental health issues if they were going to do something like that? The offender may avoid discussing the case or may show interest in following media developments. That really narrows it down. The offender may have abducted or attempted to abduct other children or adults in the past, and we went over a lot of potential individuals in the area who have committed crimes and attempted this. Following the disappearance, the suspect may have changed their appearance, hairstyle, or facial hair. The vehicle may have been hidden or suddenly sold, altered with a new paint job, or the interior reupholstered. Okay. So, yeah, a lot of issues with the timeline here. Now, also, Neither Coyote commented here. So Captain Abbin stated the mother comes home at about 2 o'clock. Heather says in the video with Tanya, I got home around noon, and also says hopped in the car at 1:20. Wilma states in the video at 12:30 Heather came home. Okay. And Wilma Cook is the maternal grandmother. And this is from the Nancy Grace transcript. Quote, and so it was at 11:30, they asked me if they could go for a short bike ride, and I said yes. And they've done this millions of times, and they've never went that far. I could go outside and yell their names, and they would eventually hear me. Okay, that actually makes sense and sounds reasonably safe if they're within earshot of the grandmother's home the entire time. Or is she just saying this to kind of cover for herself? Or maybe not. Maybe she has no clue how far they really went. She just assumed that. Continuing the quote here, and this day they just didn't come back. And so Kelly, Elizabeth's brother, he's 12. I hopped in my car because the dad came home and I went searching Elk Run. We were down by Myers Lake. We drove all over every little park in Evansdale, Elk Run, every mentionable place, downtown area, and we couldn't find nobody. I hopped in my car because the dad came home. What does and now this is the post here on Reddit. What does she mean by we couldn't find nobody? Wouldn't she say them, the girls, something, but nobody? Who is nobody? Is that like anybody? Was she looking for them or somebody else? I mean, again, we don't really know that. This, we don't know how she talks normally, if she just, that's a figure of speech that she uses. The bikes were found at close to 3:30. Heather made the counter call at the police department at 2:47. So Tammy Brousseau is the aunt of 10-year-old Lyra Cook Morrissey. And I'm going to go over an interesting piece here on radioiowa.com in a moment. But first, let's go over this transcript from Brousseau regarding these events. Okay, so then we watched the investigators put the crime scene tape up. They were there for a very long time, I would say approximately 3 hours, maybe more, doing their investigation. And we went back around to the southeast side of the lake where you can actually, there's an old, sewer building. There's an old garage that sits on this chunk of land that you can actually very easily go down a few blocks and access the back of the lake area from. From that point, you can. And so, my immediate gut feelings, because in just this 10-mile radius, there's 200 pedophiles that live in this 10-mile radius. And since the Johnny Gosh case has happened, I have a 24-year-old daughter, that is every parent's worst nightmare. And of course, if you haven't checked out the Johnny Gosh series on MindShock, make sure you check that out. To me, it has always haunted me to see it happen to other families, to watch your show. My heart bleeds for these people. You never think you're going to be in this position. This is, again, from the Nancy Grace this transcript of the Nancy Grace show. But what I'm saying is, so after the tape came down, I went back in that area and started doing my own investigation and looking around and seeing what I could see. And I could so feel that somebody had come down here, had been watching the girls for quite some time. Whether it even started as they left Heather and Mom's place, they've been following them and watching them, seen them come down here. They know the area very well. Watched the girls go around the lake. He knew how to access the back because he had seen them heading down there. Maybe they were down there, standing on those rocks, tossing them in the water as kids do. Anyway, and it was a very hot, lazy Friday, there wasn't many people out. I kind of looked around to see because after where the bikes were dropped on the bike trail, there's about 400 yards of forest. And then that grassy area where I'm telling you, somebody could easily access the bike trail from, park their car along that grassy forest, and got out and had a knife or whatever it was and said to the girls, get in this vehicle right now or it's over with for you. And I could see that happening because, where the girls, Okay. So these are some very interesting details being presented here by Tammy Brousseau, the aunt of 10-year-old Lyra Cook Morrissey. Wow. Okay, so if her intuition is true here, if her intuition is accurate, that means this would have to be somebody who's very familiar with the area, with the details of how to access this area near the lake. Now, as a quick aside here, I'm going to read this article by O.K. Henderson, posted on Radio Iowa, July 20th, 2012. Parents of missing Evansdale girls advised to stop talking. The aunt of 2 missing Northeast Iowa girls says an attorney had advised the parents of the older girl to stop talking with police and the media about the case. So not to even talk to the police. Is this strange? Tammy Brousseau, the aunt of 10-year-old Lyra Cook Morrissey, told KCRG Television the girl's parents had retreated to a hotel Wednesday night to get some rest when an investigator approached. The FBI showed up at the door, beating on the door, and wanted to interrogate them. Again, saying, quote, "How can you sleep right now?" End quote, Brousseau said. According to the aunt of the missing girls, an attorney also told Misty and Dan Morrissey not to take any more polygraph tests. Misty Morrissey was released from a federal prison in May after serving time for drug-related offenses. Dan Morrissey has burglary and drug possession convictions in his past. The couple has separated and there's been a restraining order in place that had prevented the two from coming into contact with each other. We didn't go over that detail in the previous episode. Misty Morrissey's sister told reporters on Thursday that investigators had confronted Dan Morrissey Wednesday evening, telling him they had proof he was responsible. Let me read that part again. I mean, this is right on radioiowa.com. This is not Reddit. This is not some random blog. This is radioiowa.com. Misty Morrissey's sister told reporters on Thursday that investigators had confronted Dan Morrissey Wednesday evening, telling him they had proof he was responsible. Now, again, even if that is true, that could be because they thought he was responsible, and then they use these kind of tactics where they lie to people to try to get them to confess, even if they're not sure he's guilty or innocent. So they might have said that even if they didn't know if he was innocent or guilty, without actually having any real proof. But it is interesting that his sentence, he was supposedly had some kind of plea deal going on, and then all of a sudden, there's no plea deal and he's getting astronomical sentences. I went over that in the previous episode, and this is all right around the time of the kidnapping. So was his daughter kidnapped in order to keep him from talking and naming names, and is that what happened, and he didn't name any names? But then, for whatever reason, they kill her anyway. I mean, there's a lot that doesn't make sense about all of this, of course. Unless their whole plan was to keep them hostage for X period of time. But they said, "We have evidence," Morrissey said. Well, we all know that if that was the truth, they'd already have Dan locked up. Lyric cook Morrissey and her 8-year-old cousin Elizabeth Collins disappeared from Evansdale July 13th. A chief deputy in the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office told reporters late Thursday that law enforcement agencies did background checks on the families on Friday, shortly after the girls disappeared, and so cops knew immediately about the criminal history of Lyric's parents. The deputy said it was a distraction to have the couple choose not to cooperate 100% with investigators. And their attorney, so the aunt says, so we don't have direct evidence from the attorney here. So Tammy Brousseau stated that Lyric Cook Morrissey's parents were advised to stop talking to both the police and the media. Now, if the attorney is kind of wise to the tactics of police, and they believe that the police are going to try to pin it on him no matter what, I mean, is that why they gave that advice? I don't know. But continuing on here with the timeline here, Heather Collins, mother of Elizabeth Collins, gave an interview at a local church. And this was on YouTube, but is no longer available. But this is the transcript here. Heather Collins stated, "So on July 13th, 2012 was a fairly normal morning. Drew left for work pretty early that morning, and Elizabeth decided to hop in bed. Her and I sat there for quite a while and talked. Her birthday was the July 31st, so we were talking about what we still had left for her birthday, and that we would do it that day. When I got back home from getting my blood taken and doing a couple errands because Grandma, had come over to babysit. And we talked about she had a softball party to go to on Saturday. We had another birthday party to go to that Friday, so we had a pretty busy weekend. So she was extremely excited, and when she has that stuff going on, she never wants to go that far away from me because she knows that, I am going to be home and we got stuff to do. So my mom showed up, and I gave all a kiss. I asked my mom if she wanted me to take any of the kids with them. She said, no, I got it. I said, okay, and I went and did my errands, and I called my mom and said, I'm going to be home in 10 minutes. She said, okay. The girls just left for a bike ride, and I said, okay, well, try to get them rounded back up. And she said, they just went down the street. They'll be back. And I said, okay, we'll just try to get them round back up because I'll be home. And I knew my mom wanted to leave, so I got home, and the girls still weren't home. So we had my son, who's 14, go and look for the girls, and he couldn't find them. And so then Drew had stopped at home for some reason. He just usually doesn't, but he did. So I said, well, I'm going to go look for them some more, so I did. And I was out 20 minutes or so. I went to her school, her softball places, and stuff like that. I could not find her and Lyric, our niece, and I went straight to the police department, and he was like, no, you don't want to bother them for something little. And I said, I don't care if they find him in 10 seconds, I don't care. I just don't feel good about it. Elizabeth doesn't like we have too much going on in the day for her to be gone. Like more than 15 minutes. She'd check back in because she wanted to make sure if I was home or not, because, she was a little busy person. She had things she wanted to do. So I went to the police department, and they came straight at the house, and what they always do is check the house, because you know how kids fall asleep and parents don't know why. They checked the house. They could not find either girls, and then Drew and him went on a ride, and then when I got the text was a picture of a purse. And the text said, "Is this Elizabeth's purse?" And I went, "Yes." And I saw that it had been thrown up over the gate, a gate. And he said, "Well, their bikes are here at the lake." And I went, "Are their shoes there?" Because Elizabeth would, knowing Elizabeth and Lyric, especially Elizabeth, she would not have taken her shoes off. She would, not have taken her shoes off, just left them there, and she would have taken them off to go in the water. Because otherwise, she would have come home with wet shoes. She would have been in trouble. Because, you don't go in water without adults. That had been a pretty big thing with us. We had been around water just a couple weeks ago in Detroit, and she wore a life jacket the entire time, even though she wasn't in deep water. But that's how we are. So I was just devastated, because I was like, where are they? I know they aren't in that water, but they didn't take their shoes off. They are not in that water. Someone took them, and and I looked, he came home. I just said they are gone. I just know it. And from then on, we met with the chief of police, Kent Smock. And then, the search started right then, looking for them. And then it started the next Saturday all day. I did not go out. He did not go out. We stayed to answer questions. My sister and her husband went out looking, but we knew they needed us to be there to answer questions. And plus, my health wasn't good at the time anyway. They didn't really want me out. So it was just a waiting game. We were there for a long time, many days in a row. And then we met with them almost every night for 3 months, 4 months. And then we said, gonna cut back a little bit because there wasn't any new information for us. Then December 5th, we were there for a really long time. Okay, on December 5th, we got a call for us to come down to City Hall, which we were always told that if they had been found, whether dead or alive, that we would be called to City Hall. And if they were alive, we would be sent to Cedar Rapids for testing of the girls, and it just didn't sound good. When we got the call, it was just, you need to come right now. Calls were made, family members came, and we just waited for Kent Smock to come, and who else was there? She looks at Drew out of the frame, a couple other... Dan Trontka, chief of Waterloo, and they said that they had found 2 bodies that were found at 7 bridges, and that they were not alive any longer. Our other children were at home, so we sent a police officer over to get them, and that was probably one of the hardest things for Drew and I have to do. Drew did it. We kind of knelt down and just told him, your sister and your niece are up in heaven with Jesus. They have been found, but at least we know where they are, because literally for 5 months, that's all we did. Every single day, and we did not get much sleep, because that's all we did was look for him. I would sit up on my bed and just look out my window. My windows were always open, and I would just look out, because I was praying that someone would just push them out of a car and let them go. I pray that every single night, and that we would just get some kind of, just something. And since that happened, we both knew that how Elizabeth was, she would not want us to sit back and not do anything about it. She would want us to be as active as we could in anything. So I just started talking to Noreen Gosh and really anybody that we could about missing children. We went to a lot of conferences on missing and exploited children and the Amber Alert, and we have worked really hard to get the Amber Alert changed, because that was one of the most upsetting things, I think, for both of us, is just a child missing. A child is missing. You shouldn't have to have the car to have the person taking them. So that was just one of the main, that was passed on her birthday, which was just so exciting. Just like, we are up there working, we just try to go out and speak as much as we can and just let people know. Honestly, we could have happened just in front of our house from where the tape was and stuff. That was just in front of our house. So someone could have just taken him just up the street from us. And our children did check in like every 15 minutes and stuff like that when I was home. I was usually sat out there with them or was out looking, because they didn't go very far. Their older brother went with them, but he didn't go with them this time. He wanted to play Nintendo. So we have always, talked to our kids about not going with somebody. Don't go with anybody. If they say mama is sick, because I have health issues, if they say mama is sick, don't go with them. I said we aren't going to send somebody who they have no idea who they are. It will always be like, grandma or, a grandparent or something that will come get you. Don't ever leave with somebody else because they say mommy is sick. We have always said that we have always tried to, what we thought, to do our best to protect them, acknowledge them, let them know that people can harm them, and let them know that if you are grabbed, you need to do your best to fight, because once you are grabbed, you probably won't be let go. So we are now just trying to do the best we can with just getting the word out and going to more conferences, learning about what needs to be changed. And so one of them was the Amber Alert, which was a huge thing. So there's a lot more that needs to get changed just about sex offenders, pedophiles being let out, and just that kind of stuff. So this interview was December 20th, 2013, just days after the bodies were recovered. Very heartbreaking interview. So from the CNN interview, there was a mention that someone saw him. They have his names. He saw two little girls going west on the bike trail at Myers Lake. So a comment here from Neither Coyote. Tammy says Wilma, the grandma, called Misty at work to tell her they couldn't be found. This was before 2 p.m. Tammy says Misty stopped by after work. She works a few miles from home and was off at 2 p.m. And that's when Wilma says to Misty, the girls have been gone a while, you should go find your kids. That's a weird thing to say. It can't be both. Why is Aunt Tammy lying about how Misty was told? Go find your kids is a red flag for me, especially if it's the untruth of how Misty was initially told her child was missing. Go find your kid? Yeah, that is kind of a weird thing to say. Tammy says at 2:20 or 2:30, Heather heads to the police from the front yard family meeting. If Wilma was searching for an hour and was there when Misty got home, estimating 2:10, that means Wilma left the house between 1 and 12:30. And that's the time Heather came home, 1:20, when Heather jumped in the car per Wilma. Drew came home suddenly between 12:30 and 1 p.m. And again, is that weird? Because if he doesn't usually come home, why would he come home that day? Was he told something? And the girls were seen by Wilma at 12:15 p.m., if she's not lying about that. And the bikes were seen by Gamerdinger at 12:27 p.m. based on his call logs to his daughter immediately after swerving to miss the bikes in the middle of the path. He called his daughter from the bathrooms, he said, for something unrelated. Huh. How closely is Gamerdinger, the best man of Smock, the sheriff fired after the FBI took over this case? How close was he examined and his employees happened to find the bodies? Now, it is kind of weird because if he really was involved, why would he call attention to the bikes? Unless, if we're going to play some 4D chess here, would he call attention to the bikes at Myers Lake if he knows they weren't taken from Myers Lake and they were taken from somewhere else, and he does want the search to be concentrated at Myers Lake? Oh, man. Wilma leaves the Collinses, drives to her own house to pick up Aunt Tammy, and looked 12:45 to 2 p.m. Heather leaves the Collins residence to go look at 1:20 p.m. Wilma and Tammy are at the Collinses at 2:10 to meet Misty, and at 2:30, Heather jumps in her car to go to the police station. The girls were outside riding bikes at 12:15 across the street. Heather came home at 12:30. Drew came home unexpectedly at 12:30-ish, and Wilma leaves at 1 p.m. to look for them. Lyric knows she was to be back by 1:30. Why are they so worried before 1 p.m.? That's an interesting question. Tammy references a conversation between Misty and Wilma. When does the conversation occur between Misty and her mother? Mom, go on home. I will look for the kids. Why did Heather drive to the police station instead of calling 911? Placing a counter call implies there were no officers at the station, and she used the office phone, which calls the county dispatch. I mean, these are all great questions here. These are all great questions. Because there's a lot of problems with the timeline here, and some of these comments made between these people, I mean, they are certainly, I don't want to say outright alarming, but they are curious. Just the phrasing, if true, again, we have no way of knowing whether these were actually said, but what was reported to have been said. Wow, I can't help but notice these women never say what Drew is doing. Is he just sitting at home at the kitchen table waiting while this chaos goes on? Another great question. So if Lyric knows she has to be back by 1:30, why is everybody freaking out even before 1, let alone 1:30? Do we trust Wilma and her reports of everything that went down as it went down? Let's continue on here. About 4 p.m., the youngsters' bikes and Collins' purse were found on the south side of Myers Lake. Ted Gamerdinger of Waterloo, a bicyclist who said he often rides the Evansdale Nature Trail, has previously told the Courier he saw the two kids' bikes on the trail at about 12:20 p.m., but no sign of the children. The bikes were found in the trail by the gate leading to a rock jetty and water outlet on the lake. The gate wasn't locked at the time, Aben said. There's a chain link fence on both sides of the trail. The purse was on the lake side of the fence, about 10 feet to the east of the bikes and about 2 feet from the fence, officials said. Neither Coyote also states here, this timeline that we just went over doesn't match what the family has stated in public interviews. They did 2 on a show called The Steele Report, which have since been removed from the internet. I took notes and even have transcripts of one. The family involved in hunting for them the day they went missing, and the witness who reported seeing the bikes in the middle of the bike path at 12:30 p.m. have narrowed the timeline down greatly, and it is very different than this one posted. Someone took 2 little girls at noon on a perfect summer Friday and murdered them in a town that has 1 murder in its entirety. And 3 or 4 women who were responsible for them that day all have different stories about the 4 hours they were actually missing. I cannot get this case out of my head. I can't provide a timeline like yours unless we do one individually for Tammy Brousseau, Wilma Cook, Heather Cook, and Misty Morrissey. There is a family meeting in Heather's front yard at 2:30 p.m. where Heather announces she is driving to the police station. Misty is the only member of the family to include this in her timeline. I wonder what made everyone go to Myers Lake. They all said the girls never rode that far. Unless they did and they knew they did and they just said that because they didn't want to, look as bad letting their kids ride that far, but Another post by Neither Coyote here. I have a ton of details and inconsistencies and don't know how to lay them out in a cohesive manner here. The day the girls went missing, specifically between 10 a.m., when Heather leaves the house to get her blood drawn, and 4 p.m., where the official record of finding the bikes is so messy and has so many inconsistencies it can't possibly be the truth. First, Wilma said they left at 11:30, and then that was supposedly reported wrong as it was noon, and then it evolved into 12:15. Then they were seen on the CCTV footage across the street. Heather came home at 1, in parentheses here, 3 hours for a blood draw. Then 12:30. No one has ever explained why Drew was home at noon on a Friday afternoon unexpectedly. And add to that, Tammy's verbatim description of what her and Wilma did from 12:45 to 4 p.m. is absolutely resembling a chicken with their head cut off. I start a timeline, then it gets all flustered out because no one timeline matches the other. And it's really only a 3 to 4 hour segment of the day. More comments here. The snip from the July 17th Nancy Grace interview, 4 days missing. Lake is still being drained. Then 2 days later, Nancy interviewed her again. This snippet is from the 17th, I smell a liar. I have such a minor motive on why Aunt Tammy would be involved, but she has such a large blinking arrow on her. So from the transcript here, Nancy says, I want to find out tonight if our investigation is correct. Then at the time the girls go missing, and we've got a window, a very narrow window of time, Miss Brousseau, because the grandmother says, okay, go ride your bikes, girls. It's 11:30 a.m. lunchtime. By 2 o'clock, they're already looking for the girls. That's a very narrow window. Our investigation shows Daniel, the father of one of these girls, is at his mother's house with his teenage son in tow. Tell me if that's correct or not. Tammy Brousseau, the aunt of the missing girl, says, that is correct. I know Dan and I know Dylan very well. Dan does not have a job right now. He is staying with his mother, Vicky, in Waterloo. He doesn't even have a car. He knew absolutely nothing about this. What? I had met Mom at her house because we had some plans. She had originally left. When Misty showed up to pick up Lyric and Mom said, the girls have been off and it's been a little too long, and you guys need to go find your kids, Tammy, and I have some other things that we're doing, and Tammy's at the house. So Mom came and got me. We got a phone call back from Drew, Elizabeth's father, saying, you guys need to get back here and help. So me and Mom jumped in the car, and right away we came back. We picked up Kelly, the 12-year-old son, and we started going to all these places that they'd already checked. I said immediately to my mom, take me to Myers Lake, take me to Myers Lake. This is approximately 1:45 when I asked, or 2:45 when I asked Mom to take me to Myers Lake. So she doesn't know if it was 1:45 or 2:45. Okay. We pulled into Myers Lake right about where Jim and I are standing, and I got up and just jumped out and started asking random people, have you seen two little girls? One on a mountain bike, gave the complete descriptions of them, and a man, they have his name, I don't know who he is. He said to me, yes, I seen two little girls going west on the bike trail. And as you can see, it's a small lake. It's not a huge lake, so the bike trail wraps around and then comes back east, and that's where the bikes were, in fact, found. So when they found the bikes and they called us and told us Misty was standing here with us, Misty immediately called Dan, and Dan called his mother. She was at work. She took off work, and she hurried up and picked Dan and Dylan up and came down here and met us to start the search and all of that for the kids, yes. Okay, Nancy Grace states, all right, Tammy Brousseau, you are bringing up a horrible dream. I've got this horrible dream where I'm running and the street, and I can't find my 4-year-old twins, and I'm just stopping everybody. I'm shaking them, and I'm going, have you seen? And I'm trying to get the words out. Describe John, David, and Lucy as fast as I can. I'm trying to describe them both at the same time, and nobody's seen anything. Nobody's heard anything. And as soon as I start running, and I see the next person, I grab them, and I'm grabbing them by the shirt and the shoulders, saying, have you seen them? Where are they? And the dream just goes on and on. Nobody's seen anything. And to hear you tell it, it's just like that. You get out of the car and you just start running up to people and grabbing them and saying, have you seen these girls? Then what happened? Take it from there. Brousseau states, okay, so then we watched the investigators put the crime scene tape up. They were down there for a very long time, I would say approximately 3 hours, maybe more, doing their investigation, and then we went back to the southeast side of the lake, and this is what I went over before. She starts talking about the specific area of the lake, the Johnny Gosch case, and then her intuition about what happened. So Dan and Misty Morrissey went on Jane Velez TV show. And this is their timeline from this TV show. Neither were there to notice they were missing, and only Misty participated in the search from 2 to 3. Dan wasn't even called and told his kid was missing, and wasn't told his kid was missing until 4, and then his mother drove him and Dylan to the lake in approximately 45 minutes. And Velez Mitchell states, I want to understand the position of the bikes because I think that is absolutely crucial. The girls' bikes were discovered at about 4 p.m., just an hour after they were reported missing. An 8-year-old Elizabeth's purse and her cell phone were also found about 20 feet away from the bikes, and they say they didn't find any clues with the bikes. Now, I want to ask you, and maybe your husband Daniel knows, did the bikes look like they were placed there deliberately by the girls? For example, were they on the kickstands, or were they scattered on the dirt road as if they had been dumped there, Daniel? Daniel Morrissey, father of Lyric. He states this, when I got there, it was around 5 p.m., and they had already roped off the whole area, and they weren't allowing anybody back there. I have no idea what the bikes' positions were. I believe the direction they said was going west on the trail, so like they were going to probably continue in the same direction. They just stopped, it seemed like. I don't know, I didn't know that the purse was 20 feet away or anything like that. Okay, so he doesn't even know all these details? Honestly, we haven't received hardly any information about any of this, or any updates to any degree. We've just been sitting, waiting, walking, looking, talking to people. It's just been a nightmare, this. It's just been a challenge to continue to hold everything together and continue just believing and praying and trusting God that he's got this. And either way, the way anything goes, he's big enough to sustain us in this time, and we're just going to trust in him. So, Morrissey also states, I can tell you what I know. I know it's a little disturbing, and it's kind of frustrating for us as a family as well, because you don't notice sometimes what did your kid throw on that morning and what did they take off in. I left for work at 8:30 that morning, and so Lyric was in her pajamas. She was in a bright green shirt. Sometimes she tends to wear that same pajama outfit, with my mother over my sister Heather's. I know for sure she had her purple flip-flops, and that's the only shoe that is missing from the home, so we know that for sure they are about. Velez Mitchell states, well, tell me that. What was that? What? My understanding. Yes, tell me that. Spell it out. Describe what was missing. Morrissey stated, what was missing is her purple flip-flops. They're just maybe a Walmart brand. They're flats. They're purple. They're about a size 9. We believe that they have the diamonds across the top that go over the foot. They are a size 9. It's the only shoe that's missing for Lyric right now. As far as clothing, I woke up and seen her bright green shirt after she left. I'm not sure what she wore. Elizabeth, my understanding, has on her white t-shirt, her black high tops with pink on them. So that's kind of the description we have right now. Again, Heather and I both, kind of left for the morning to go about some business that we need to take care of, and the girls tend to be a little bit more independent, so if they got ready on their own and maybe mom was cleaning or taking care of the dog, she may not have seen that they changed or what they changed into, so I know it's frustrating probably for a lot of people out searching as it is for us to not have it. Velez Mitchell states, have you taken your own dogs out? I don't know if this is scientific, but I know my dogs know where I am, like practically when I'm 2 blocks away. Have you taken your own dogs out to see if maybe they react to anything? Morris, I said, we don't have any animals of our own for Lyric. Okay, we have 2 dogs. Well, we actually have 4 dogs at Heather's house. 2 small dogs, 2 large dogs, and to my knowledge, we haven't taken any of them out. I'm not sure if we need permission to do that, but we haven't, and I don't think that's been a suggestion yet. I know they have canine units out. They have some other dogs out. They've taken plenty of property to use for smell, clothing, shoes, and trained professional dogs, so I really trust that, that they're using the appropriate measures in that respect. Okay, so, yeah, it's kind of weird. A lot of conflicting stories here from all these people. I mean, I don't know what to make of that. Alright, I'm going to go over some really, really mind-shocking posts by Ruth the Bee, a Redditor who I went over on the previous episode. So, apparently Ruth the Bee has done quite a bit of research here. There are too many coincidences with the kidnapping and the bodies and those men's relationships. I'm used to people losing interest once they realize it's a case with so many nuances. Probably the reason a 60-minute crime show won't touch it and why so much footage and broadcasts have since disappeared. The Collinses did 2 interviews with Ron Steele and Smock. Can't locate the footage. GMA had the women, Tammy, Misty, Heather, and Wilma on for 3 segments live from Myers Lake. No longer exists. KWWL had subpoenaed for all the footage of their interviews, including the raw footage, and it had been erased by the time the warrant for it went through. There's no... What? What? But even still, I mean, there's got to be an archive. I mean, this is not like, the 80s or the 70s, in which case you could still find some news footage from back then. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that this I mean, yeah, maybe the raw footage... I mean, do they not have an archive? But even if not, I mean, there's got to be a copy, some kind of digital recording of the broadcast, even if from other independent parties. The WCF local paper was so biased and eradicated many of the articles it wrote up about these families. There was even a photograph of Gamerdinger meeting with the police at the lake at the precise time he confronts them about seeing the bikes at the lake laying down in his path, so he had to swerve to miss them. before 12:31 p.m. What? His sighting shortens the timeline of them going missing to 8 minutes. 8 minutes, no more than 12 minutes, for two girls who were doing circles in the street to make a beeline at top speed 1 mile to Myers Lake to lay the bikes down, toss the purse over a fence that was open at either end, and vanish. You know, so if they're seen going the opposite direction of Myers Lake, and then there's only 8 to 12 minutes unaccounted for, how fast would they have to get there? I mean, this really opens the door to the theory that they did not bike to Myers Lake, but then who saw them biking at Myers Lake? And can that person be trusted? Ruth the Bee also posted this. Why did Chief Smock get fired? Why did Councilman Wyant quit right before his scheduled retirement? Did that councilman own a property that butted up to Myers Lake? What did people think about the rumored affair between the mother and the police chief? What? Okay, so admittingly, this is just a rumor, and there's no mention of which mother, but wow. I mean, if that's true, I mean, that's pretty crazy. Another post here. I really think the perp had some connection to Dan Morrissey. You don't get 90 years in prison for a dime bag of weed. And when you're that involved that extensively in narcotics, there's all kinds of unsavory characters around. It may not have been to settle a vendetta over a drug deal. It could have been a pedophile who was also a drug buyer who happened to notice kids were available to grab while he was making a buy. Bad things that happen randomly are so rare compared to bad things that happen related to narcotics. That's a fair point there. Ruth the Bee responds here, why did the state offer him a plea bargain of 8 years then? Why did he accept it, then decline it? Why did the judge seem to have a grudge and give him 90 years without a trial? So if this is all going on right around the day of the disappearance, he accepts, then something causes him to decline after he had accepted. What was that something? And then now, why is he getting 90 years without a trial? How is that legal? What? So you got 90 years without a trial? What? So here's another post by Ruth the Bee. It's very weird. I'm sorry it's so weird. No one cares, and clearly I am too interested. I really do want to discuss this case ad nauseum because it is so weird, and no one seems to really care, and I am terrified that the FBI gave up. At this stage, I couldn't even tell you who was holding this case. It was passed around like a hot potato because of that location. Smock and Evansdale headed the investigation for the first 24 hours. Then the county Blackhawk stepped in, and they called the FBI, not Smock. So that's interesting. Because what was Smock into that he didn't want investigated? Then Iowa State got involved. FBI ran the search. The draining of the lake was a cluster expletive too. I remember the county or Smock demanding they weren't in there. And the FBI saying they were going to drain it after the dragging and the sonar. It took days. Like they were positive something was in there. Huh. Then FBI had Blackhawk County run the investigation after the bodies were found. Like the FBI stepped back. The bodies must have said something. The FBI wasn't leading anymore. At one point, years later, Dan Trelka said the state was processing evidence, and then radio silence, and then news outlets reported the state was running the show. Smock saying he goes to the lake to sit and think about the girls. Why there? Why not where they were found? Another post by Ruth the Bee with some disturbing details. Why is Misty still fine 8 years later? She didn't move or leave the area. She didn't change her name. They just call it Even Steven. This is in response to a post. Would these Evansdale drug dealers be criminal enough to kill 2 innocent little girls? Okay. So this is from a poster who's from a major city, and when I think big-time dealers, I'm thinking gangs and cartel, real hardened criminals. I don't mean to sound condescending in any way. Would these Evansdale drug dealers be criminal enough to kill 2 innocent little girls? So if that's true, they just call it even Steven. That makes no sense to me. Why would they hide the bodies way out at Seven Bridges? Why did the FBI want the lake drained? They didn't even call it a kidnapping until 2 weeks after they disappeared. Smock and the FBI and the parents called it a kidnapping over and over again, but the FBI specifically never referenced it as a kidnapping, or it wasn't listed as a kidnapping until weeks after they'd been missing. That was another weird flag that wasn't usual. Drug debt doesn't fly with me at all, again, especially if you look at the timeline minute by minute. Wilma is on record saying the last time she had eyes on them, the camera from the parking lot caught them riding aimlessly. Timestamp is off by 8 minutes per owner. And then Gamerdinger sees the bikes on the path after 12:25 but before 12:31. There was a Craigslist ad asking to buy hay. He posted, he says, while getting a drink of water at Myers Lake by the restrooms. That is said backs up his timeline. We're all on record. Doesn't coincide with drug debt retaliation. So he's there. What? There was a Craigslist ad to buy hay? Okay. Huh. This is weird. So let's move to the Web Sleuths forum for some very interesting discussion. Someone actually dug up that Weichman Pig, a pig slaughterhouse livestock wholesaler, has a location in Delhi, Iowa. Not Delphi, missing the P, but Delhi, Iowa, 1 hour from the Seven Bridges County Park, which is curious. Okay. So the CCTV footage is from around 12:15, possible 8-minute delay. So between 12 and 3, Mr. Carpenter, who was watering his grass on Lake Avenue, said he saw the girls riding by, but he can't remember exactly when, between 12 and 3, so that's not that helpful. So here's a map of the area and the possible bike path based on security footage and the sighting of the guy mowing his lawn, or watering his lawn, rather. I mean, something else that's kind of weird, though. This guy watering his lawn that said he saw the girls, I mean, if they want to go to the lake, would they go that far out of the way? I mean, to get on this nature trail bike path, wouldn't they want to get right on it? Like, why would they go all the way around to the other side? Now, here's a curiosity, though. Apparently, one of Misty's possible boyfriends' parents had a residence right on the lake. We're talking a few hundred feet from where the bikes were discovered, and also along this path that this witness saw the girls while watering his lawn, as opposed to the other side of the lake. And also, apparently there were unusual tire tracks in this back area here. So, yeah, I mean, really weird stuff. So, I'm going to go over another article. This was one that is no longer available on FoxNewsInsider.com, but thankfully everything is archived. So this was July 22nd, 2012. FBI believes missing Iowa girls may be alive. Family of Lyra Cook Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins plead for their return. So it's curious, what did the FBI know immediately, early on, that has never been revealed? And are there clues here? The FBI has told the family of missing Iowa girls Lyra Cook Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins that they believe the girls may be alive. The mother of Lyra Cook Morrissey and the aunt and grandmother of the girls spoke to Shannon Bream about the latest developments in their disappearance. Their grandmother, Wilma Cook, was the last known person to have seen the girls. She said that authorities told the family that they feel the girls are alive, and they have suspects. Let me read that again. Wilma Cook said that authorities told the family that they feel the girls are alive, and they have suspects. Tammy Brousseau, an aunt of Lyric and Elizabeth, said that the last Monday night, search dogs positively identified the girls' scents in a wooded area east of where their bikes were found. Lyric's mother, Misty Morrissey, said everybody's done their polygraphs, everybody's given up their phones, their vehicles, so there's been full cooperation. She added that no one in the family has been told what the evidence is or why they believe the girls are alive. I mean, what is going on with this case? So Lyric's mother is saying here that she hasn't even been told why the FBI, who believes the girls are alive, or who these suspects are, or anything at all. This is weird. Brousseau pleaded, Lyric, Elizabeth, if you can see us, if you can hear us, we love you. Whoever has them, we forgive you. Please just let our children come home. Please, we're begging you at this point. They miss their mommy and daddy. Please just let them come back home. I mean, obviously it's tragic in a whole different kind of way, reading it, knowing what the outcome was, unfortunately. But the details, the time of, I mean, what did the FBI actually have at this time? And again, we don't really even have a time of death, so there was a scent. So the dog's scent here is interesting, because the scent continues in the same direction as the bike, if we can trust this, what has been said. Again, I don't know. But if it's continuing around, looping, it's kind of weird, though, because if they went all the way around the lake first, why would the bikes, they turned around? Also curious is that in this map, they lay out also a damaged fence here, which is curious. Obviously, I don't know if, obviously, we don't really know when that fence was damaged. So, but it's weird. So, the scent here supposedly tracks to this road and where these weird tire tracks were seen. And also happens to be, literally one house away, 1 to 2 houses away, is the residence of Misty's boyfriend's parents. Now, that could be coincidental, of course. So, now, let's continue on with the timeline here. So, Ted Gamerdinger of Waterloo said that he rides the trail often. So, he's very familiar with this trail. So, again, with this footage here, the CCTV footage is from Cornbelt Auctions, which has since been closed. So, the article here, or rather, this was on Nancy Grace, what I referenced earlier. So, the girls were seen riding their bikes behind the auction house on Broven Boulevard. So, this is less than a block from their grandmother's house, and riding away from Myers Lake. Another bicyclist couldn't believe they had biked 1.5 miles to Myers Lake in 8 minutes. Therefore, maybe only their bikes were left at Myers Lake. Maybe they were almost home when abducted. Does sound kind of hard to throw bikes and girls in a vehicle, I know, but they were seen almost home. But the thing that's weird, though, is, again, we have this dog scent that supposedly places them not just with the bikes. Obviously, the bikes would have their scent on them. But not just with the bikes, but also going back to where a vehicle could have been parked. Yeah, problematic indeed. So, supposedly the CCTV footage is 8 minutes slow, but either way, I mean, it's tough. So, is that... Okay, I don't know about this coincidence. So, according to Google Maps, it takes exactly 8 minutes to bike the 1.8 miles to Myers Lake, or whatever, maybe 1.5 to the exact spot with the bikes, who knows. 8 minutes from the CCTV, and the CCTV footage happens to be exactly 8 minutes slow? Is that just too much of a coincidence? So there's infinite time combinations of how much it can be slow, because it's not just 1/60th, because it could be 2 hours slow, it could be 5 hours slow, it could be 10 days off. Again, I mentioned this in the Maura Murray case that CCTV security footage technicians, they stated that in the early 2000s at least, about half or more of all security systems, including banks and supposedly high-end institutions, were not accurate. Now, not accurate is anything from, obviously, could be minutes off, could be hours off, it could be a year off. It's just CCTV footage notoriously does not have correct timestamps. I guess that could be because anytime the power goes out or a system is reset, you'd have to reset the time, and the people are lazy and they don't do that. So I guess that could be a reason. But regardless of the reason why, is it curious that it's exactly 8 minutes off? I don't know. That's just weird. Huh. Carbuff posted this. The video footage is the main reason I have always thought the bikes were staged. If the kidnapper had a pickup or van, throwing the bikes and girls in would not take very long, only a few seconds. Yeah, I mean, the dog scent's a problem, though. Unless they... Yeah, I mean, everything from the timeline... Everything about this case doesn't make sense, including the timeline of when everybody was getting back to the house and allegedly panicking when supposedly they had more time to get back. I mean, I don't know. This is all very, very weird. Here's another bizarre post from on Web Sleuths from user Considering regarding the lawn watering guy who said that he saw the girls. And apparently this guy watched on the news. His name was Robert Carpenter. He reported that he saw the girls riding their bikes on the afternoon that they disappeared. I don't know if law enforcement included his time in the timeline or not. As I recall, he did not report a specific time that he saw them, but it was a wide time range, like between noon and 3 p.m., which really wouldn't have helped much. On the other hand, when he was speaking with a reporter at the lake, he seemed to be going to tell a reporter a more specific time, but it appeared to people watching the video that his wife stopped him from being more specific. Okay, so maybe this user himself did not see this, but he's reporting it. That's really weird. That's really weird. Also, looking at the image here of the bike trail, so there's a fence on both sides of this trail. So, I mean, this is actually kind of scary because... I mean, if there's only one person involved, yeah, they could turn around and go the other way. But if there's two people involved, one in front, one behind, there's almost nowhere to run here. Why was the purse tossed over the fence? I mean, there's just so many things that don't make sense here. I mean, but to ignore them, I mean, these could be critical details. Like, how do you rectify this situation and how exactly it happened? Also from this CCTV footage, which is really not much, some people believe there's actually a man or another person following the girls on their bikes. Which is weird, and I actually just thought of another scenario. Did the grandma... I don't know if this has been discussed before. Did grandma actually go with them when they were riding their bikes? And then she said she didn't for some other reason? Again, this is MindShock. I am not claiming anything is true or untrue. It's just, again, this video is so poor. I mean, it's impossible to say anything. But what people are digging up is quite curious. Apparently, in the KWWL subpoena, warrant and information Iowa code websites, results include code 804, an arrest warrant, and code 808, a search warrant. So, are people alleging here that there was an arrest warrant and a search warrant involved in this case? That's weird. And the children were going west, so there's the First Security State Bank ATM as well. And has this video never been released as well? Like, are there other videos too? Another interesting curiosity here is from the testimony of the aunt, which is regarding the guy who saw them going east on the bike trail at 2:30. Now, what's curious is that law enforcement stated the last time the girls were seen was behind the big and tall from the CCTV footage. So does that mean they do not consider this guy credible, or they were never able to locate him either? That's weird. Or did Tammy make that up, the girl's aunt? Did she make that up as well? Some people are saying she's not credible. So the girls were riding west on Brovon, heading towards River Forest Road. The closest ATM going in that direction, which would mean they turned north on River Forest Road to go past this ATM. The ATM located at Pronto Market, 3452 Lafayette Road, Evansdale, Iowa. We have another Lafayette connection here. I mean, these names. So here's another summary of the earlier story. The story was that Misty came home at 1:30 p.m. after she got off work and told Grandma to leave and go do her thing with Tammy, and that she would wait for the girls to come home and bring Lyric home with her. And then when Heather got home at 2 p.m., the girls still weren't home. And that's when she decided to go to the police station. And then Drew called the grandma to tell her to come back, so she came back with Tammy. Okay, so is that suspicious? So so the girls are out riding bikes. Would the grandma and Tammy get sent away before the girls came? Yeah, none of this really makes any sense. And then that story got changed, of course. So another find here from KWWL.com. Family of missing girls gets attorney. This was July 19th, 2012. Father under supervision. On Friday morning, Misty Morrissey contacted KWWL saying she wanted to set the record straight. We were woke up in the middle of the night after we'd fallen asleep after the 6/9 by the DCI. We were put into rooms and we were for 3 hours accused of taking our children. Told that we did it, that we need to tell them where the children are at. It was a pretty intense coercion, Misty Morrissey said. So at that point, just being regular people off the street, we thought we might need just some legal representation or advice. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What does everybody make of that? I mean, there's a lot of problems here, too, because Tammy said, go to Myers Lake. Why? So that means someone called... Does that mean someone called somebody and told them they saw the girls riding at the lake? Okay, because according to, again, the CNN transcript... Nancy Grace, missing girls family frustrated by police lake search, which aired July 19th, 2012. In this transcript here, when they found... Tammy stated, so the bike trail wraps around and then comes back east, and that's where the bikes were in fact found. So when they'd found the bikes and called us and told us, Misty was standing here with us. Misty immediately called Dan, and Dan called his mother. She was at work. She took off work, and she hurried up and picked Dan and Dylan up, came down here and met us at the start of the search and all of that for the kids. Yes. When they found the bikes and they called us, Misty was standing here with us. Okay, what does everyone make of this? So they were at the lake at 2:45, according to Tammy, talking about the man who saw the girls. The man, who is this guy? She said law enforcement have his name, but law enforcement never said that the girls were last seen at riding their bikes at Myers Lake. Officially, they were last seen at the CCTV footage. So who is this guy, and why does law enforcement not find him credible? But anyway, Tammy is there, and then the bikes are found at 3:58. So, and someone called to tell them, someone called from the other side of the lake, ? Going here. What is going on here? What is going on here? So, another post here by Jules71. Where was Misty between 2 p.m. when she was called and told to go to Heather's, and sometime after 3:58 when they were called to say the bikes had been found? If you go... Okay. We heard that Grandma looked from 3 to 4, then called law enforcement at 4. That was one of the many stories we have now. The missing posters were printed saying they were last seen riding their bikes at the lake around 2. Huh. That's curious. So, from here, this I'm guessing this was the first or one of the first missing posters. Elizabeth Collins and Lyric Cook were last seen July 13, 2012. They were last seen riding their bikes at a nearby lake at about 2 p.m. The bikes were found abandoned near the banks of the lake. One of the girls' purses was found not too far away. Lyric has chin-length hair, tan skin. She has a mole in the back of her neck the size of a dime. Anyone having more information on the whereabouts of these two missing girls or having seen these two girls after 12:15 p.m. Friday is asked to call the Evansdale Police Department. Now, the further posters coming out later simply states Elizabeth and Lyric were last seen riding their bicycles on July 13th, 2012. Their bikes were later found at Myers Lake in Evansdale. So that's curious. So the family had some kind of insider information that they were at Myers Lake. So how did they get this information? When did they get this information? And why did law enforcement not find this information credible regarding that this is really weird. So back to Jewel71's post here. Every time I try to figure out who did what and when, 2 o'clock always comes back to me. Something went down at 2. I wish I had a computer program to plug all this data into and tell me where all the conflicts and inconsistencies are. That's what we're attempting to figure out. So what's weird, though, is that, Tammy's story doesn't make sense here. Tammy and Misty's conflicting, because... this doesn't make any sense. Because Gamer Dinger stated that he saw the bikes in the trail at 12:20, and that's the official story. So who's this guy that saw them riding the bikes at 2? This case is really getting crazy because it's impossible to keep all this. There's nothing that makes sense or adds up here. So supposedly Misty works close by. She left work at 1:30, but she didn't arrive at the house until 2. But of course, there's all these different stories and different arrival times, so... Also, keep in mind, all of this discussion is from July 2012 on Web Sleuths. An interesting quote from Rick Aben here on Des Moines Register, July 17th, 2012. Aben also declined to elaborate any clues found with the girls' bicycles, saying only that they had been processed. Aben said that while the bikes were found on the recreational trail by the lake, that doesn't tell me the girls have been there, just their bikes. Curious. Now, Dan Morrissey said the area they found, it's fenced in on both sides. Dan Morrissey said it was right where the maintenance gate was. So that is a spot to me that looks like a trap, for an abduction to happen. For someone to just come along right there and follow them down or whatever, it would probably be the worst spot for them to be, that little area right there, he said. Okay, so we have this guy, so we have the father here. We have Tammy, the aunt, also giving her intuition that somebody could park there and abduct them there. We have this other individual that law enforcement apparently has not been able to verify saw the girls with the bikes at 2, and yet Gamer Dinger saw them at 12:20. Saw the bikes already there at 12:20. What does that mean? So it does. So are people insinuating, especially with law enforcement, really believe, or at least the FBI believe, or DOJ, or the law enforcement believing that the families might be involved in the disappearance? Does it seem to people like they're just injecting all of this information to make it look like they were abducted at the lake when they really weren't? I don't know, but then how did nobody see anything? That's the other thing that doesn't make any sense. There's this white SUV, but, all of this is really weird. But I could see why some would allege the parents might be involved just from the way this is all lining up. And the countless inconsistencies. Obviously, that doesn't mean they actually are. Others are speculating here regarding the CCTV footage in that area where they were biking with this the way the area looks here. This pic scares me. The kids might have just been biking to the end and back. Notice the trucks at the end of the street. If a trucker took them, it would make sense to take the bikes to a different location, because if the bikes were found right there, you would suspect the trucker. I mean, that's a good point. If they were abducted right near the area of the CCTV footage, if they have some kind of connection to the area, they might want to dump the bikes elsewhere. I mean, that's still risky to do, to dump bikes, but if you're just dumping bikes, but then how do we explain the dog scent? I mean, unless it was just really following the scent that was still with the bikes and the purse, maybe? Because if it was staged and the purse was just tossed, I mean, why toss the purse over the fence, though? That's kind of weird, too. Wow, here's another mind-shocking post by iSleuth. Okay, I am sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the two bikes were spotted by a regular, a runner or a cyclist, in the middle of the path. Gamerdink. But when the girls were missing and the search for them began, the two bikes were then discovered leaning up against the fence. I don't know which direction or how far apart. Okay, wow. Okay, if this is true, or even if they were found in the exact same spot, or close to the same spot, can both things be true? If the girls stopped and did whatever, then came back to the bikes, and then moved slightly? Because who said that the spot was absolutely exact from the first sighting of the bikes to the second sighting of the bikes? Is it possible they were still operating under their own free will between the first sighting of the bikes and after they were missing? I mean, yeah, this is really tough. This is really, really tough. So, an interesting post from Athena12 here. It's strange that several family members were at Myers Lake at 2:45, were supposedly told by a man that he had seen the girls there, but not a single one of them went around the trail to look for them? Did they just wait around in the parking area until law enforcement found the bikes at 3:58? Seems like they were going out of their way to make sure the bikes were found by someone else. Unless, I mean, maybe they did search. I mean, how do we know whether they did or they didn't? They couldn't find them, whatever, but, Okay, so here's the final clarification here on Grandma's story. So apparently they first left for the bike ride at 11:30. At 12:15, she saw them riding their bikes by the Big and Tall clothing store that is right by the house. Not clear if she looked out a window and saw them or if she actually went outside and looked for them. But she thought after seeing them at 12:15 that they would be coming in soon. They didn't. And eventually she looked for them and couldn't find them. So if this is accurate, I mean, that does shed some light on this, because they're supposed to be coming in soon, supposedly. Or, I mean, I don't know here. How long do kids or at least how long do they usually ride their bikes? They're going at 11:30, so after they'd been riding for approximately 45 minutes in the vicinity, and then they're supposed to be coming in soon, or did she yell at them and tell them to come in soon, whatever, and then they're not coming in, so now she gets more alarmed at 12:15. Again, all depends on which timeline we're operating under. Okay, so let's get to the final mind shock here. I mean, just when your heart can't break anymore, it's tough. So from the Des Moines Register, July 18th, 2012, Wilma Cook on Wednesday confirmed that Lyric had tried to run away from home several days before the cousins were reported missing. She said Lyric packed a bag after her father got mad at her for not completing her chores. She headed for the door and I grabbed her, Cook said. She dropped the backpack and I hugged and kissed her and I said it'll be okay. So you have this poor kid trying to run away a few days before this happened. Also, supposedly around this time a week prior, the girls were not riding their bikes, they were walking, but they were also really late from when they were supposed to be at the other family's house. So not this house, but the other one, which is not that close. So that's kind of weird. That's kind of weird. So major problems with the timeline here, and if these problems can be resolved, I mean, a much clearer picture could be formed here in exactly what happened and how, because right now, I mean, it's so tough. So, as always, all the MindShock listeners out there, feel free to give your own thoughts, theories, suggestions, rebuttals, or debunkings of any kind in the comment section. Hope everybody found another edition of MindShock True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patreon is a good priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.